to the May 18th meeting of the City of Lakeland Planning and Zoning Board. The board meets every third Tuesday of the month to review proposals for changing the city's comprehensive plan, its future land use map, zoning changes consistent with the map, and conditional use permits. The board is made up of 7 members appointed by the City Commission and is assisted by the staff of the Community and Economic Development Department. Staff will advance any presentation slides that should have been provided prior to the meeting. The meeting is divided into 2 parts. The first part is a public hearing where we expect to hear new applicants explain their request and receive comments from affected parties. The second part of the meeting is termed the general meeting and primarily consists of acting on recommendations from staff about cases that came up in the prior month's meeting. We invite everyone who wishes to participate to be heard. We do ask that you be concise in your comments and that the speakers avoid being repetitive. That is, if several people have pointed out traffic concerns, there is no need to hear additional comments regarding traffic again, but we would like to hear anything new that has not been addressed. In order to allow everyone to have an opportunity to speak, there will be a 3-minute time limit for each speaker, and the clerk has a timer for this purpose. We respectfully ask that you adhere to this rule. We also ask at this time that you silence all mobile devices. With that, we thank you for being here, and I'll turn the meeting over to the Secretary, Ronald Roberts.
Good morning. Item 1, major modification of a conditional use to allow for graduate level programs with a maximum enrollment of 400 students for Florida Southern College on property located east of Pennsylvania Avenue, north and south of Ridgewood Street, and north and south of Frank Lloyd Wright Way. Owner applicant, Florida Southern College, and this is for consideration of final decision.
Good morning, Todd Vargo, Senior Planner with the Community and Economic Development. Here to present you the Florida Southern College request to use the St. Joseph's property at 310 Frank Lloyd Wright Way for their graduate nursing program. It's the location map. I think we all pretty much know where St. Joseph's is between Lake Morton and Lake Hollingsworth. Here's a base map and an aerial. See, it's not just the campus proper, but it's also some of the parking lots around there and the play fields to the north are all part of this request. Here's a picture of the sanctuary taken from across Frank Lloyd Wright Way. Originally, this was the Southside Baptist Church. The property was granted a conditional use in 1983 to allow a daycare and kindergarten program to be administered within the existing church facilities. In 2008, an ordinance was approved for conditional use for a private school, church, and ancillary activities. So historically, the church use has been carried forward as the property has been approved for different uses, like the daycare and the private school. As you'll see later in the presentation, when we get to our conditions of approval, we're also trying to continue the legacy use of the church within the sanctuary building through this conditional use permit. This is the parking lot on the southwest corner of the intersection of Frank Lloyd Wright Way and South Boulevard. We're looking south across Frank Lloyd Wright Way. The Dean House is located off to the side, off to the left of the screen. This is the alleyway that runs past the Dean House, parallels South Boulevard. On the far side of the parking lot, you'll see that the house that is there. As part of this conditional use permit, we're asking for fencing and landscaping to be put to meet city standards around the parking lots. So this house will be buffered from the impacts of the parking lots. Here's a better look at that house from South Boulevard. Again, on the left side of the picture here will be a fence and some landscaping. This is across the street at the southwest corner of the same intersection. This is another parking lot that's grass The same thing will happen here. There'll be some perimeter landscaping added to meet the city code, and that surface will need to be kept dust-free. This is Frank Lloyd Wright Way. The St. Joseph's / Florida Southern College property is off to the right. You can see some of the classrooms. This cutout here was used for, I believe it was used for drop-off, a drop-off zone for St. Joe's. This will be repurposed to parallel parking for Florida Southern, excuse me. This is looking north along Pennsylvania Avenue. You can see again on the right side of the picture is the St. Joseph's / Florida Southern property. And on the left side, you can see the historic homes along Pennsylvania. Further down Pennsylvania, past the buildings that contain the classrooms, is a garbage dumpster that will be relocated to the rear of the apartment buildings on Success Avenue. I think that's Colony Arms. Those are also owned by Florida Southern. We've received some complaints from homeowners along Pennsylvania Avenue about the noise, the trash pickup with this dumpster being located right across from them. So this is Colony Arms, the back of it. This is the dumpster. This will be widened to a two dumpster enclosure. This is the alleyway that runs between a few of the parking lots and the back of Colony Arms. This is the play fields at the intersection of Pennsylvania Avenue and Riggins Street. It's important to note that at this time, Florida Southern has not asked for any change to this area, the play fields, or any of the parking lots that we've seen. I'll let them talk about this during their presentation, but right now there's no change proposed to the play fields or any of the parking lots. This is the butterfly garden between South Boulevard and the back of those apartment buildings. On the eastern side of Southern Boulevard, this garden area, open space, butterfly garden will remain in place. Florida Southern will be required to preserve this passive recreational use. Here's the site plan. I don't know how well everybody can read this, but so these are the play fields. It says open space to remain. Here's the sanctuary. Here's the classroom buildings along Pennsylvania. So this says existing school building, graduate nursing classes. Here's the parking lots that we looked at before. This is the paved parking. This is the grass parking. Those will remain. And then again, there's two parking areas along South Boulevard. This is the butterfly garden slash passive recreation area. Here is the Colony Arms apartments, and this is where that dumpster will be relocated to. That dumpster currently sits right here along Pennsylvania, and again, it'll be relocated over here. Again, the only change that this conditional use permit it's been requested through this conditional use permit is to use this building for graduate nursing classes. All the parking lots will remain, the open space will remain, the butterfly garden will remain. I guess the only other change would be the relocation of the dumpster to there. This is a letter that we've received from the Lake Morton Neighborhood Association. They listed some concerns, which I believe we've addressed in our conditions. So I'll quickly go over their concerns. Number one is they want to make sure Florida Southern uses the site for its graduate nursing program and not housing or undergraduate programs. Number two, Florida Southern preserves the sanctuary building and not alter it beyond some reasonable branding. Number three, they preserve the athletic field green space along Riggins as a green space and not be allowed to use that space now or in the future as a parking lot. Florida Southern preserves the butterfly garden on South Boulevard that sits between the two parking lots and not allowed to pave that space and use it for parking. Number five, Florida Southern does not enter into a lease agreement for parking with a potential commercial user of the Dean House. And six, Florida Southern makes landscaping improvements to the existing parking lots. You'll see that we addressed these in our conditions when I get to them. But before I get to the conditions, I'd like to give the applicant the opportunity to come up to the center podium and discuss their proposal.
Can you please state your name and address for the record?
Good morning. For the record, Terry Dennis, and I'm with Florida Southern College. And good morning, board members and staff. Mr. Vargas did a really good job of laying out the proposal itself. If you would allow me, I want to emphasize a few of the points I think might help answer questions you would have or some of the community members. So with your permission to do that. First off, on the conditional use, I think the most important thing is what was mentioned, that it has been used for the last dozen years as a teaching location. We're doing exactly the same thing. We're just changing it from elementary, junior high to college, adult type teaching on here. It will be the home for our graduate nursing program. And so that's the main thing that will occur. We are getting a little bit of leeway, and we talked with city staff about this. I know the Lake Morton district letter had said strictly graduate. If this past year has taught us anything, it's taught us flexibility. And this past year, we turned every inch of space that we had on campus into teaching classrooms because of social distancing. So we had to shrink everything down. So we're leaving ourselves the ability to periodically hold some undergraduate courses there as we need to, but it will be primarily graduate program. I just wanted to get that out that, you know, for the facility, we need to have a little bit of flexibility if we need to get in and do some certain things that might involve a 20-year-old instead of a 26-year-old on here. Second thing is we're saving the facility. So what you see on the two buildings is exactly what you will see if our sale goes through and you grant our conditional use to go through this. It may get some paint in needed places, and of course the signage will change, but we're changing nothing at all on the outside exterior of either one of the two buildings. We'll be doing some interior changes because a elementary school classroom in certain places might not fit what we need to do with adult learning. So I'm sure there are going to be some wall changes, et cetera, on the inside, but we want to save the outside of the building looking exactly like it has looked for these last decades. It was mentioned the green space to the north. We want to use that just like it has been being used. So, and that's one of the places where we'll have some undergraduate uses because we'll probably do some intramural activities during the day. It's going to be restricted, of course, to certain hours, and we're not doing any really heavy, over-exuberant type of intramural activities. So this will be some of the, probably some frisbee throwing type things. What I talked with Julie and Billy Townsend about, and we think is a great idea, and we've already challenged our intramural director to come up with some thoughts of some non-contact, fun types of things that we might can take periodic Saturdays and have a Florida Southern community type of event where, I don't know what they would do, croquet game, something, but get a little more interaction between the neighborhood and the college so we get what we are. We are all neighbors in that area, and I think this is a great opportunity for us to share some space and use it appropriately. Parking lots, as was mentioned, will stay exactly the same, except we're going to bring them up to current code. They need to be restriped, so we'll take care of all the conditional things that you need to do with the parking lots. I want to take a little credit from the college's side for the dumpster relocation. It's going to be in the conditions, but we'd like the neighborhood to understand when we went out and started talking with city staff about are there any issues with this facility, one of the things that they brought up was the neighbors on the west side of Pennsylvania have a horrible time with their dumpster pickup. I think St. Joseph's is being emptied 2 or 3 times a week. And of course, dumpsters are noisy, and it's right across the street from their homes. We own the Colony Arms apartment on the east side of the parking lot, so we're going to give up a couple of our parking spaces, enlarge that facility, get a larger dumpster, and we'll just haul our bag trash from St. Joseph's across the parking lot and go to that dumpster. The on-street parking was mentioned, and we met with city staff. Of course, we don't need drop-off pickup lanes. Fortunately, our students are not still at home where parents are having to drop them off, but we'll use that for on-street parking, and that fits with what was going up and down Frank Lloyd Wright Way. We looked at, is there some opportunity to do some type of street enlarging there, but it makes no sense to have more space for 1.5 blocks and then have to shrink it back down. So it looked like the on-street parking was the best solution for that. And I believe that has hit all the items. We're just excited to bring this to you. We think it helps us on space. It saves a really nice building that has been in our historic district for a long time. And we're going to be giving additional education to master's level nurses. So what better thought than these people that are help save our lives? We're helping them to further their education. Just a little side comment, in the last few months, with our masks, and of course I wear a Florida Southern mask, I've had 2 different opportunities to go into a doctor's office, and a nurse in the facility said, "Oh, are you with Florida Southern?" And I find out they've gone through our courses there. That's a comforting feeling to see that education. So we're just real excited to bring this to you. I stand now for any questions you might have.
I have a question, because I always have questions. I know that there are, first of all, I think it's a great idea, but there are a couple of very small businesses right there on Frank Lloyd Wright Way that depend on the city allowed parking that is currently there. And I'm just hoping that students, if there's an overflow in the parking lots, do not take those parking spaces so people can continue to shop there.
Yeah, ours should be strictly in our parking area. We've got now more parking spaces in those existing lots than what our current graduate program, capability is, so.
I mean, I don't know if the city, is it possible to put up signage that maybe encourages, if you're a student, to not park there? I don't know if that's possible, but that would be my option.
You're thinking further to the west?
Yeah, it's right there by Patio 850. As people come in and go to classes, because I know they're at different times, they will, everybody is likely to take whatever is most convenient to where they have to go. So I just wanted to make sure that those spaces were saved for people who come and visit the community and want to go to those small businesses.
Yep, yes, ma'am.
Any other questions from the board?
I was going to add to that, Terry, it might be helpful if you explained the phasing of the student enrollment, the initial enrollment that you anticipate, and then what the ultimate enrollment would be, and then the number of classes per day and kind of the operating hours in case there are any different operating hours than those businesses.
And certainly, with our current master's program, we've got about 125 students. Now, these are mostly working adults, so they're current nurses they come to us either mornings or afternoons, or they'll take a day and, change their schedule to have classes. But never do you see all 125 there at one time. So they're scattered. Classes start at 8 in the morning, they go till 9 at night, and it's Monday through Friday. So that's why I was saying, I think we've got about 190 parking spaces in the official lots there for this facility. So for the next several years, we've got far more spaces, and we will actually have students who are ever there at one time. We look at the max, probably getting to no more than 400 students in this, but it's going to take us 5, 6, 7 years to grow, to that point. So this will be a slow, gradual increase of students as we move along.
Do you anticipate any overflow parking from the apartments into these lots at all? Or is
Well,
it just going to be for the students?
We have been renting 8 parking spaces from Southside Baptist and then St. Joseph since we purchased those apartments. Now we just won't have to rent them. The overflow 8 will park right there in that adjacent lot. So,
Will any of the people that are taking courses at the building right there where the Association of Realtors used to be, the physical therapy department, will they be taking classes in both of those campuses or buildings?
no, ma'am. The DPT is pretty specialized with what that building is, and they've got enough parking. Plus, it's a 1-block walk. So if they had to come over for a lecture or something, probably they will walk. In addition, and the board may not be aware of this, we have a shuttle service on here. So we've got 7 14-passenger vans that do nothing all day long except circle between the apartments and the campus. So if there were ever the need to pick up a batch of people from DPT and bring them over for something, my guess is they're going to walk or they'll hop on the shuttle and ride across.
And will those shuttles be stationed in one of those parking lots?
They
all the time?
completely circle the campus. If you're in one of our apartments, every 15 minutes a van stops. So we make every effort to keep our students from getting in their cars and driving 3 blocks to campus, circling the campus to look for a parking place, and then get mad because they don't find it. So we really go out of our way to try and help people understand, gosh, get on the shuttle, or this is a small campus, walk.
No, my question was, where would those shuttles be stationed when they're not in use?
They're not, that's what I'm saying, they're not ever stationed. They completely circle. We've got 3 different routes, so the vans are always moving.
Might be worth considering taking a couple of these on-street parking spaces that you're considering doing in the drop-off and pickup lanes. And as a grandparent who sat in those lanes for years, for the shuttle drop-off and pickup. So they've got a designated spot that's
Well,
on the street.
we hadn't got to the detail of looking at where they would stop. They currently stop right in the parking lot next to Colony Arms, so it'll probably be the same thing. And I should comment on the street parking too. We mentioned that we're turning the drop-off pickup lanes into street parking now. That's going to be convenient to St. Joseph's, but those are certainly not reserved for Florida Southern College. That's City of Lakeland public street parking. So whoever pulls in and parks on a street side space, that's completely up to them. I think 2 of them, if I'm right, Mr. Bromley, will turn into handicap. Okay, so.
Are there any other questions from the board? All right,
Okay,
thank you.
thank you.
Any questions from the public? Or any comments? Please come up. Please state your name and address for the public record.
Okay. My name's Ken Eddy. I live at 817 Pennsylvania Avenue, just across the street from the vacant lot the gentleman was just talking about. And I heard him talking about that vacant lot, and he says, at this time, we're not planning on doing anything of that. Well, I wouldn't want it to turn into a parking lot, and I've noticed most of the conversation here has been about parking lots. And I would prefer not having a parking lot across the street from my home. And that's basically what I'm concerned about. I wouldn't want an apartment complex either going to, because it would devalue the value of our property. And that's is my number one concern. Of course, it's personal, but that's basically all I have to say.
Okay, thank you.
Shirley.
Are there any other comments? Please come up.
I'm Gail Lasarso, and I live on South Boulevard, but my driveway is on Riggin Street. And I am very concerned about the green space.
Ma'am, can you please state your address for the record?
725 South Boulevard, driveway on Riggin Street. I'm not less, I don't know, I got the letter, so I'm 250 feet from the green space, which has always been wonderful. We don't have any problem with it staying green space, but we are concerned for our property values, number one. And second of all, traffic, which we've already addressed. But the green space has not been specifically said at this time, does not say that it won't be turned into a parking lot or possibly a dorm. That would be like horrific to dwarf our homes would be dwarfed looking if they put a dorm there. So yeah, we're concerned, and I'd just like some more clarification if possible. That's all.
Okay, thank you.
Denise Robson, 829 Success Avenue. I live adjacent to the Colony Arms apartments, so they're my immediate neighbor. I echo a lot of the sentiments already heard. I'm concerned about the parking spaces because that's what I have. I don't want to see them evolve into anything other than parking spaces. Don't want to see a two-story building, preferably not dormitories. I'm also concerned about the existing structure already there, that there are designs probably to maybe change it down the road. One thing I will say that does concern me, I am the dumpster neighbor where you're going to relocate that second dumpster, and I am but one house dealing with that dumpster, and I have the very same concerns. We have trash. It's not very well maintained. We have trash in and around the dumpster. The dumpster itself is falling apart. The structure around it is not maintained. The trash ends up behind our alley. We clean it up. Not to mention the trash from the facility itself. Students leave items, and I know that's not your immediate concern, but I'm concerned about that translating into this property as well. We pick up all kinds of trash from that property. So I'm very concerned about that dumpster and would like to ask if consideration couldn't be made. I don't want to infringe on any of my neighbors, but could you not move that existing dumpster that's 50 feet from the corner of my property further west onto yet another parking place and put it there where it's a little bit more buffered by the garden space from our property. Having a second one there causes me great concern because I too deal with slamming dumpsters at 6 a.m. on a Friday morning, slamming all the time with trash being put in. So I have the same concerns as my Pennsylvania neighbors. And the last comment, Mr. Dennis requested flexibility regarding that structure, having asked for it to be used as a graduate nursing facility, and perhaps having undergraduate students there. And again, I live next to undergraduate students, and there's a big difference between an 18-year-old and perhaps a 24-year-old in terms of their maturity, their respect for neighbors' property, car alarms, radios, you name it, noise element. And I'd like to just request that consideration be given to keep it to what they asked for, and not let it morph into something that would be ultimately full-blown undergrads and grads in that structure. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you. Are there any additional comments? Would the applicant like to come up or the city come up and address those concerns?
Certainly, and thank you for the comments. I'll try my best on the green space, and of course I use now because that's what we're looking at. We have no plans to do anything different with the green, and I think for the neighborhood's security, and I believe the conditional use is going to pretty well spell this out, if the college in the future ever had thoughts of changing that to something else, they would have to be back here again to do something specific related to that. So, you know, as far as I can see right now, I've been at the college for 33 years, and there's nothing on our planning that would change that use. But I also am smart enough to not say never would there be a use. So I think our protection for the neighborhood is that you'd have to come back with a specific use to do that. And understand the neighbor, and I'm sorry I didn't pick up her name, that lives next to the dumpster on Colony Arms side. A couple of different things. One, we hope it will be better maintained when we actually have staff sitting at St. Joseph's going to that every day. So and it won't be a second dumpster, it'll actually be a larger one. So that whole structure will end up being rebuilt and sized and be up to current looks. Now, personally, I have absolutely no issue with, and I'm looking back towards city staff, with seeing if there's a different spot that it potentially could be slid to, but we're kind of at the mercy of where the pickup could be done, so.
Good morning. For the record, Chuck Barmy, Community and Economic Development Department. When we went out and visited the site here a couple of weeks ago, I think the issue on the west side of the alley is that there are more utilities along through there that would complicate the pickup and drop off, the physical pickup and drop off of the dumpster enclosure, which is why we were continuing to recommend that the Colony Arms dumpster be expanded and improved. I think in terms of the reconstruction of that dumpster enclosure, it would have to go through and get a building permit through the building division. The design, we can certainly look at that in more detail and maybe look at a way to make it more aesthetically pleasing, you know, in terms of the structure itself. But the utilities on the west side of the alley really were, I think, the bigger issue in terms of where that dumpster placement would go.
So we will do whatever is within the possibilities to make this as workable as it can be.
Were there any other locations that the dumpster could be relocated that has been looked at, or was it just that specific area that you spoke about?
I know from a staff standpoint, we were looking primarily at the Colony Arms because it was an existing location, and is really, when you start looking at the other parking lots and the other frontages, that location is less visible, and so it's really hard to find an optimal location for something like that dumpster enclosure. What we typically look for is it in a spot that's not as visible to the neighborhood or to the public? Is it in a place that can be serviced without conflicting with utilities and trees? And really, is it on an alley? And so that's where we were looking at making that a better setup than what it is today, and expanding it to account for the new school.
Visibility is great, but it also has audibility. So I think that's what their concerns were. We're listening to the clang of the metal dumpster up and down. So.
And that's something that we certainly take into account as well.
And the material is likely to change. So currently you can see it's a vinyl coated fencing material. And so I know that we have standards for masonry enclosures, and if there's something that's masonry that is complementary of the apartments as well as the campus, the new building, or the new program at the existing building, then I think that's something that we could even write into the conditions if it's a masonry enclosure.
Yep, and we're quite open to using whatever would be viewed as the quietest, best material to use. Did I hit the questions? I think it was mostly green space and the dumpster. Is that correct?
I agree with, I think the concerns are valid about that open green space, that you have no foreseeable plans, but things change and housing changes. And Is there any sort of condition that we can put in there? I know that they would have to come back up through the board for a use change. But typically it's a lot easier to do that once you have the first round of approvals done.
So just to point out that this conditional use is on top of the underlying zoning designation. And on the green space and the remainder of the campus, the underlying zoning is RA4, which is single family. So any potential multifamily use or dormitory use would require not only a modification of this conditional use, but would also require a change to the underlying zoning. Those are two pretty big hurdles to get over to have that intensity of a use on this property. By right, today, there could be single-family homes developed on the green space, including a condition that says it'll in perpetuity remain as green space. That is something that has not been done for any other zoning condition. It's not legally defensible to lock someone into a use in perpetuity. So the best that we can do is say there's a process that they need to go through. And again, in this instance, that would be two requests. It would be to change the underlying zoning and then to change the conditional use.
Thank you for explaining.
I think
Finished with me?
I think so. Thank you.
Before I get to the conditions, let me say that we have gotten some, we've received some comments from the public. One came in last night from, I believe it was the lady in red from 829 Success about the dumpster and anybody building anything on the parking lots, which we've said that's not happening with this conditional use permit. A letter came in, an email came in yesterday from some people along Pennsylvania. They support and they also canvass some of the businesses around who also support it. Allegedly, I can't say, that I specifically heard myself from those businesses, but the email listed about 12 or 13 businesses around that also claim to support this. Heard from the people on the west side of Pennsylvania about the dumpsters. We got another phone call from a gentleman, I think, along Pennsylvania who supports this conditional use permit. And then there was also a gentleman who lives further south along South Boulevard who was concerned that the graduate students and the traffic was going to block this alleyway, which I don't see that being a problem. Why would you use the alleyway when you've got Frank Lloyd Wright, Pennsylvania South? Why would you use the alleyway when you've got actual roads? So that being said, like I said, we have gotten several comments from the neighboring neighborhoods, communities. With that, I'll let you know that we are recommending approval with these conditions. Number one, permitted principal uses, graduate school level academic programs, and those uses typically associated with higher education, such as classrooms, laboratories, offices, and study areas. This shall not preclude the occasional use of these areas for other college level programs, provided that graduate programs comprise the principal use of the spaces. The former church sanctuary may continue to be used for religious services, provided that such uses occur at a different time than academic activities. Number two, maximum enrollment. The maximum enrollment shall be limited to no more than 400 students, with an estimated 100 students anticipated to be on site at academic hours. Number three, development regulations. In accordance with the RA4 Urban Neighborhood Context Subdistrict Standards, except as otherwise provided herein. Number four, site development plan. The project shall be developed in substantial accordance with the proposed site development plan included as attachment C. That was the site development plan that y'all saw on the slides. 5, landscaping and buffering. Landscaping and buffering around each of the parking areas shall be installed in accordance with the Land Development Code. Off-street parking areas located south of Frank Lloyd Wright Way that were previously used as overflow parking shall be improved to city standards and maintained as a durable, dust-free surface at all times. When adjacent to a protected use, supplemental fencing and landscaping shall be installed to meet the minimum requirements for a Type A buffer specified by Figure 4.5-9 of the Land Development Code. Number 6, open space. A, the existing playfield located south of Riggin Street, north of East Ridgewood Street, and east of Pennsylvania, located south of Riggin Street, north of East Ridgewood Street, and east of Pennsylvania Avenue shall be used as open space subject to the following. 1, permitted uses shall be limited to either public or private recreational activities, including but not limited to intramural sports, provided that such uses are restricted to the time period from dawn to dusk. 2, the use of the playfield for either temporary or overflow off-street parking shall be prohibited. Again, this is under open space. B, the existing garden and gazebo located north of Frank Lloyd Wright Way, south of East Ridgewood Street, and east of South Boulevard shall be maintained. 7, solid waste collection bins. In accordance with the Land Development Code, except that the existing solid waste collection bin located on Pennsylvania Avenue shall be relocated and consolidated with the adjacent Florida Southern College Colony Arms Apartments located at the northwest corner of Frank Lloyd Wright Way and Success Avenue. Should Florida Southern College at some future date sell the apartments to another entity, city approval shall be required prior to the relocation of any solid waste collection bins which serve the graduate school and sanctuary. 8, all new outdoor lighting shall be arranged so as to direct lights away from adjacent residential areas in accordance with Section 4.6 of the Land Development Code. Outdoor light fixtures shall be of the fully shielded type such that the light emitting, distributing, reflecting, and refracting components of the light fixture, the lamp, the lens, reflective surface, etc., shall not extend beyond the opaque housing of the fixture. Activity lighting designed to allow for the nighttime use of outdoor athletic facilities is expressly prohibited. Transportation and site access. 1, concurrency. All concurrency determinations shall be made in accordance with the city's concurrency management ordinance. 2, on-street parking. On-street public parking shall be limited to the north side of Frank Lloyd Wright Way between Pennsylvania Avenue and South Boulevard and along the Pennsylvania Avenue site frontage as depicted in Attachment C. All on-street parking shall be located outside of the site visibility triangle of the Frank Lloyd Wright Way, Pennsylvania Avenue intersection as determined by the City Public Works Department. A bulb out shall be constructed in the northeast quadrant of this intersection to reduce crossing distances for pedestrians. Number 3, bicycle parking. Bicycle parking shall be provided in compliance with the Land Development Code and City Engineering Standards Manual 4. And finally, 4, commercial deliveries. Commercial deliveries shall be limited to the hours between 7 a.m. and 9 p.m. And I think that's the end. Yep. I'll stand for any questions you have too. Otherwise, like I said, we do recommend approval.
Any questions? And since this is up for consideration of final decision, is there a motion?
I move that we approve this with the conditions that have been stated.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion has passed.
Thank you.
And if we could get item number 2, please.
Item 2, conditional use to allow an adult daycare and vocational training facility on property located at 2710 West Memorial Boulevard. Owner, Auto Owners Life Insurance Company. Applicant, Alliance for Independence. And this is for consideration of final decision.
Good morning. For the record, I'm Philip Scarish, Principal Planner with Community and Economic Development. As we heard, the Alliance for Independence, they are currently located at 1038 Sunshine Drive East off of Crystal Lake. They're looking at relocating the old Auto Owners Insurance Building located at 2710 West Memorial. Down here. Show you the location. This is the location of the site in West Memorial. I'm going to zoom out a little bit and show you the site in relation to Lone Palm. And so here's the entrance to Lone Palm, West Memorial, and here's the site here. It's about 1.6 acres. The Alliance for Independence intends to utilize the property for adult day training purposes as described by the agencies for persons with disabilities. There are, and I'm going to let the applicant go into more about the good work they do, but just brief description. There's no outdoor activities, and it's monitored by and audited by the state. There is morning and afternoon drop-off times, limited to a 30-minute window. And I'll just show you some slides around. This is looking at the site, the Auto Owners Insurance Building. This is the existing site. There's going to be no physical changes to the building or parking. And this is their existing building. This is looking back west towards the Lone Palm entrance, which is just down here. And this is the site plan that will be adopted with the conditional use permit. Again, there's no physical improvements being made. They're just showing where their buses will come in and drop off their clients, and then they will leave that night. But I'm going to stand back. I'm going to let the applicant describe what their services are and let them describe the conditional use. This is an O1 zoning category, so this use would again would be a conditional use in the O1. It's our light office category. So I will stand out of the way and let the applicant describe their services and have answer questions, and we'll have conditions at the end.
Thank you. And just a quick reminder to state your name and address.
Yes, ma'am. Brent Gohagan, 1960 East Edgewood Drive. Good morning, board members. And golly, I've already screwed up, Mr. Scarce. I was pronouncing it Sears all this time. I apologize. My bad. I am, once again, well, I don't think I've stated this yet. I'm an attorney. Been practicing law for over 25 years. Been doing land use law for almost 20 years. I have the privilege today to be here representing Alliance for Independence, which is a not-for-profit organization that provides a great service to this community. And you might know them better as the host of the Central Florida Wine Festival that's on the Lake Mirror Promenade. But they provide a service that's even more important than that. Believe it or not. And we'll get into that in a second. I've got with me today two representatives. I've got Katie Tinsley, who is the CEO and president of AFI, and I've got Neil O'Toole, who is a board member and is in charge of this particular project. We really do hope and genuinely expect that this application will be simple and easy for you. This is generally and practically a turnkey transition for us. No new building, as Mr. Skeers has already mentioned. No plans to modify the exterior at all. And then, as is set forth in the justification in the application, you've probably seen this already. The subject property and area are complementary to the use we are seeking and provides an environment and place for adults with developmental and intellectual disabilities within the Lakeland area to engage, be involved, and interact, allowing for and perpetuating a sense of personal dignity and self-worth for this otherwise overlooked and slighted segment of our community. and otherwise constitutes a critical area of need that has primarily been addressed and met by Alliance for Independence alone now for 67 years. Allowing for this requested use at this property allows this worthwhile objective and endeavor to continue. Currently, it is used as office space. The subject property currently where we're seeking to move our operations. The building here, though, is much more suitable than the current location. It's self-contained and in a much better condition. The current property has too much maintenance and repairs that are needed that would cost my client approximately 5 times what it costs for AFI to acquire this particular piece of property, which again is in a much better and suitable condition. The neighborhood that they're located in right now has become undesirable for what they do and the clients that they serve under these circumstances. Ultimately, and I guess most importantly from my perspective, legally speaking, this request is consistent with your comprehensive plan and your land development code, specifically with regard to 2.4, which is the conditional use section of your land development code, 2.4.4, and will not create a materially greater burden or materially reduce the level of service, and consistent with 2.4.3 and 2.4.5, and is compatible with the surrounding area. So from a legal perspective, we've met our burden. We do have the burden. All applicants do when we come before you. We have met that burden pursuant to your law. Staff recommends approval, which is always a glorious thing, and we appreciate that under these circumstances. One thing that I would like to mention, we want to look into, well, given that AFI is a charitable not-for-profit organization, and given its unique mission and service to this community, and as you can imagine, during the pandemic, everybody got hit, right? But some of these organizations such as this, which is these type of organizations are crucial, particularly for this segment of our population and community. And the pandemic has really hit them hard. So we're seeking, we're going to look into. We have not done so yet, haven't talked to anybody, none of the staff yet, but we would like to look into obtaining a waiver of condition 4A, which is as follows: pedestrian bicycle improvements. A, prior to the issuance of a business tax license, the applicant shall pay into the city sidewalk fund in lieu of constructing a 10-foot multi-use trail identified by the West Memorial Boulevard Transportation Enhancement Project Master Plan. So we're going to look into seeking a waiver there, not necessarily putting that before you right now, but given, again, the nature of this client and what they do for this community and what the pandemic has done to them, you know, under these type circumstances, particularly with an organization like this, this can be really difficult. And so we think a waiver would be very beneficial to furthering their cause. At this time, I'm going to ask Mrs. Tinsley, the CEO and Executive Director of AFI, to come up to provide you with more information as to what they do, who they serve, their mission, and what their operation is and will look like on this property. Mrs. Tinsley.
Hi, thank you. Alliance for Independence, we were founded in 1954. Currently, we're located in the back of a residential neighborhood off of Cumbie Road. We have seven separate buildings, and so this move has been a long time in the making. We've actually been working on it since about 2008. So my board is extremely excited. This is a 22,000 square foot, one building, no terrain issues, which we have currently. It's the air condition works, which, believe it or not, is a big thing, and our current facility is literally falling down around us. We're not going to do anything but put up some walls inside, so the building will look just like it does now. Drop-off will be super simple. None of my clients drive, so they either arrive via my transportation or the Citrus Connection, or maybe mom and dad might bring them. And at most, at full capacity, I would only have 25 employees, so that would be like the number of cars plus, you know, any visitors in the parking lot. I've never been to one of these things before, so I'm not exactly sure what I should be telling you, but I can answer any questions. Right now, my current client count is about at 50. We're at half capacity, so even in a non-pandemic world, we would be looking at anywhere between 85 to 100 clients, with the ultimate growth be 120.
Any questions from the board?
Nope. Did she state her address? I don't remember hearing that.
Oh, sorry. No, Katie Tinsley, and it's 1038 Sunshine Drive East.
Yeah, so just to wrap up, like I was relaying to you at the beginning, should be short and sweet for you, we hope and expect anyway. So we do thank you, board members, for your time and consideration for purposes of this change in use, which in this instance is for, I think as you can see, a very good cause and worthwhile cause that is carried on by AFI. And to that extent, we would respectfully request that you approve this application. Thank you so much for your time. And we will stand for any questions. I also have Mr. Neil O'Toole over here, who's part of the board and heading up this project. Gadd and Associates is assisting us with this as well. Mr. Gadd could not be here today, but otherwise we'll stand for questions.
Any questions from the board? And since this is a public hearing, is there anyone from the audience that would like to speak on this item?
All right, well, moving on to the conditions. There are 8, and I'll briefly go through them. Number 1, permitted uses. Adult daycare is licensed by the agencies for persons with disabilities and vocational training for disabled individuals, a maximum enrollment of 100 clients. Number 2, site development plan. The site shall be developed in accordance with the site development plan as you saw earlier in attachment C. Minor modifications may be made at the time of site plan review without requiring a modification to this conditional use permit. Off-street parking in accordance with Article 4 of the Land Development Code, except that vehicle use and drop-off areas shall be marked to prohibit unauthorized parking within the right-of-way and other areas not designated for parking. Number 4, pedestrian bicycle improvements. 4A, this is one that Mr. Gohading alluded to. Prior to the issuance of business tax license, the applicant shall pay into the city's sidewalk fund in lieu of constructing a 10-foot multi-use trail identified by the West Lakeland Boulevard Transportation Enhancement Project Master Plan. And B, an ADA compliant pedestrian route shall be constructed between the principal building entrance and the West Memorial Boulevard right-of-way line. C, bicycle parking shall be provided with accordance of 4.11.6 of the Land Development Code and Index 900 of the City Engineering Standards Manual. And 5, signage shall be in accordance with Section 4.9 of our Land Development Code. Number 6, cross-access easement. A cross-access easement agreement shall be secured and maintained with the adjacent parcel to the east. The agreement shall be approved by the Florida Department of Transportation and accorded with the Polk County Clerk of Courts. Number 7, transit access and circulation. If the provision of direct transit service to the principal building entrance is determined to be viable, the applicant shall coordinate with the Lakeland Area Mass Transit District Citrus Connection to accommodate on-site access and circulation of vans or paratransit vehicles. And lastly, approval as conditional use shall be subject to additional permitting requirements that may be imposed by the Florida Department of Transportation. We don't see any at this time, but when they go to FDOT, there may be some additional requirements that they may have to meet. And that's all we had. And we do recommend approval, as Mr. Gagan said, it is consistent with our comprehensive plan and the Land Development Code, and we do recommend approval.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a motion from the board?
I'd like to make a motion to approve with the conditions as presented.
Second.
Second. And
all those in favor?
Board members, if I could, before you vote on this, sorry. If I understood correctly, Ms. Tinsley said that at full capacity would be 120 clients. Was that correct? 120 clients. So the condition is for a maximum of 100. Does that really need to be 120? Because if it does, then we should change the condition so that you don't have to come back and ask for a modification at a later date.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if we can do that, it would take me 5 or 6 years to get there to 120. Right. But if it works, Neil, okay, change it.
So, yeah, I think we would want to amend the recommendation for 120 then, and I suppose do we need a motion from the board to?
Yeah, we do have a motion to You can, if
I'll
the maker of the
rescind my
motion
motion.
can accept the amendment, then
I'll rescind my motion and accept the amendment to 120 clients.
I second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Thank you.
Item 3, please.
Item 3, change in land use from mixed commercial corridor to residential medium on approximately 8.12 acres, a change in zoning from multifamily residential to planned urban development on approximately 10 acres, and the application of PUD zoning on approximately 46.1 acres, concurrent with a city-initiated context district change from suburban corridor to suburban neighborhood on approximately 7.75 acres, to allow up to 199 single-family detached dwellings and 2 commercial nodes on property located east of Lake Parker, north of State Highway 92 East and west of Fairway Avenue. Owner, Kazi John A. Revocable Trust. Applicant, Sarah Case. And this is for consideration of final decision.
Good morning. For the record, Matthew Lyons, Community and Economic Development. As most of you will recall, this request initially came before you back in February. I'll just go briefly through the history of the property here and hand it over to the applicant to let you know what's changed since they were initially heard. The subject property is located on the southeastern shore of Lake Parker. You can see by the location map here. And the property is currently vacant and used as pasture. Historically, it was the Lakeland Country Club golf course back in the 1920s. Most recently, it was used for mobile home and storage shed sales, a liquor store, and outdoor advertising, excuse me. And all those uses have been terminated and removed. The subject property is bounded by the Larson natural gas plant on the west, and a mix of industrial uses to the south and west down here, retail commercial to the east, and the Lake Parker West North Cumbie neighborhood to the east within unincorporated Polk County. So if you recall, the property was annexed back in June of 2012. Per the annexation and the application city land use, the property had a county land use designation of L4 that was applicable to 48.05 acres and 9.1 acres of Polk County Linear Commercial Corridor, LCC, along the frontage. In January 2013, the following future land use designations were applied to make it consistent with the city comprehensive plan. 12.03 acres of MCC, mixed commercial corridor along the frontage of US 92. 9.76 acres of conservation land use on the shore of Lake Parker, and 34.9 acres of residential medium east of East Lake Parker Drive and north of the commercial frontage here for residential development. And in 2015, the subject property was the subject of a brownfields area-wide planning grant from the Environmental Protection Agency. And that grant was used to develop the East Lake Parker West North Cumbie area plan. It was a effort led by the Central Florida Regional Planning Council, Polk County, the City of Lakeland, and other stakeholders. And in that plan, the property was identified as a catalyst site and a key redevelopment opportunity to bring substantial economic and environmental benefits for the community here. And consistent with that vision, the last action was in 2015, a small portion, the north, was zoned MF12 multifamily, approximately 10 acres in area. That was done so with the anticipation that it would be developed for affordable housing. That did not happen. So the request before you today is to obtain land use and zoning to allow for the development of a single-family subdivision with a maximum of 199 units. The previous request was for 209 dwelling units, and that was denied without prejudice by the board on March 16th of this year. And the applicant is here before you to explain what has changed since at that time. And just a few photos here of the property. And on the screen, we have the previous site plan submittal for the 209 units and the revised submittal, which has 199 units and a couple other changes. And with that, I'll hand it over to the applicant.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning. My name is George Lindsay, along with the econ staff, Sarah Case and John McVeigh in the rear. Address is 3020 South Florida Avenue. We're here today representing Mr. John Causey and his family. This will be the third time you've heard this case and the history of the background. As such, I will avoid repetition on the many matters we agree with staff and request your favorable consideration on the few matters that we disagree with staff. As requested and reflected in your staff report, we did add the access road to Fairway Avenue, resulting in a lot reduction. We added and improved the access to the park area along Lake Parker. Okay. Having raised my kids on a cul-de-sac, I don't understand the dislike for cul-de-sac, but nevertheless, we did take out the cul-de-sac and extended the roadway to the north. We further reduced density to 35% of the lots being 50-foot lots, with the remainder 65 at 40-foot. While we prefer to place the 50-foot lots along the east boundary perimeter, we conceded to staff and placed the larger 50-foot lots interior to the community. In their concluding remarks, the staff takes the position that workforce housing may be a laudable goal, but does not warrant the relief requested. Well, let's step back for a minute and ask ourselves, why would we go forward and ask for 50-foot lots when many governments are still struggling with 50-foot lots? The answer is simple: affordability. Affordability is driven by density. Whether the site is developed for 199 homes or just 99 homes, the wall, the fence, the landscaping, the roads, the sidewalks, curbs and gutters, water sewer lines, etc., engineering and permitting are all the same, whether it's 99 or 199. The goal of affordability is to spread these fixed costs over the greater number of homes. In a recent article published in Governing Magazine, the publisher made the following statement: there are two principal culprits in the affordable housing crisis: the cost of the house and the amount of money that people earn. Pretty obvious. Those of us on this side of the table, we do not decide the wages of the cops and the teachers and the firefighters and the meter readers and clerks. And every day that goes by, we have less influence on the cost of housing as we face double-digit increases in lumber and copper and concrete, doors, windows, light fixture, and the diesel fuel it takes to deliver these parts and pieces. In the application before you, we seek to minimize the artificial cost drivers while optimizing density. The staff has acknowledged their role in these findings are advisory. They have the limited latitude and responsibility to offer alternative conditions of approval. They do not have the discretion or the authority to respond to special conditions. You do. You do have the authority and the discretion to acknowledge special circumstances and to weigh in on community objectives and to put forth alternative conditions. To that end, I draw your attention to the concluding recommendations in the staff recommendation 4.0, which Ms. Case handed out to you. I draw your attention to the items that we wish to take issue with staff. we respectfully request that the staff's recommendation for 50% of the lots be 50. We ask that be reduced to 35%. Only then can we even achieve the 199 lots mentioned above. Regarding item E2, garages and garage ratio, obviously a new home on a 40-foot lot, the two-car garage will represent a larger percentage of the front elevation of that home. Larger than a two-car garage will represent on a 50-foot lot, provided that both homes are built at the full buildable width of the lot. The house in the package, this house, and every other sample we gave you earlier that you've seen in your previous package. This 1,600 square foot, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-car garage home can be built on a 50-foot lot and meet the garage limitation. However, this same home would not be allowed on a 50-foot lot because the garage ratio does not conform. This forces all homes on the 50-foot lots to be larger and therefore more costly. We respectfully request the 50-foot lot garage limitation be stricken. Items 2 and 3. All of these items deal with traffic and traffic issues. The staff goes into great detail to recite and impose conditions such as right in and right out and full movement, southbound, eastbound, northbound, etc., and then adds the caveat as required by FDOT and as required by Polk County. As you know, Memorial Boulevard is a state road and not a city road. East Lake Parker Drive and Fairway Avenue are county roads. The city had the opportunity to annex Lake Parker Drive when they annexed this property, but chose not to. What we simply ask is that all traffic access mitigation matters be left to the agency having jurisdiction. The staff may very well be correct in every point they make in their findings, but let's not presuppose that what these agencies might require and make them binding conditions in this approval. The same holds true for item 4C. Whatever Polk County requires regarding a crosswalk, that's what we'll do. Ditto for item 5A. If the Lakeland Area Mass Transit District requires a bus stop with the necessary improvements, we'll meet those standards. But let's not presuppose that until at least those agencies have reviewed the application. As such, we ask that items 4C and 5A also be deferred to the agency having jurisdiction. That does not allow us to do anything less than those agencies require. Ladies and gentlemen, this should not be a difficult decision. You don't have this room full of different factions, pro and con on this matter. Instead, you have the opportunity to allow millions of private sector dollars to invest it in a part of our community that needs and deserves this economic investment with no request for any public sector dollars. When the staff measures our request against the Static Development Code, our request does not entirely fit within the box, therefore these conditions. However, you and the City Commission have the discretion and the authority to adopt conditions of approval that allow this project to go forward and fit in your box. As such, we respectfully ask that you approve LUS 21-001 and PUD 20-023 and adopt the 4.0 recommendation alternative that we presented to you today for consideration. Thank you for your time, and we are pleased to respond to any questions you might have.
Any questions from the board?
Because I wasn't here last month, can we just go back to the previous slide that was the original plan for a second so I can take a look? Okay. So the difference is the cul-de-sac, and they look uniformed. Okay, can you put it to the newer one?
The new one, put the new one back on there. The biggest change, Commissioner, is the access to the lake Staff asked us to separate those lots and provide for a 20-foot pathway and dedicate that to the HOA, pave it, pipe it across the retention pond, and then to the dock and the preservation area across the street. We've agreed to do that. The cul-de-sac was a change to allow for the access to be further north than the earlier plan. This plan does reflect a change we made during the initial staff review before it got to you last time, that provide the access to the east on Fairway. The earlier plan, our earliest submission did not provide for that, but in conversation with staff during the development process, we agreed to make that concession.
As you may recall, at our last meeting, I brought up my concerns about the 40-foot wide lots.
Yes, ma'am.
In looking here, I see that we already have precedents in this area with the villages of Hawthorne Mill, which it was 30% of those lots were the 40-foot lots. So, I mean, it seems to be working there fine, and I think that quibbling over 5%, really, you know, I see no reason why we couldn't go with 35% of the lots being 40-foot.
Thank you, ma'am. That was
35% of the lots would be 50-foot,
that's
and the rest would be 40. So 65% would be 40
Okay,
foot.
then I think that we need to work a little bit on that and have more of the lots be wider.
Well, I don't necessarily agree. The fact of the matter is the purpose, as I stated, is to spread as much of these fixed costs over as many lots as possible to make them affordable to the market that is facing challenges now for housing. The recitation of those improvements that I just listed, the water, the sewer, the storm, and all those things are all fixed costs, whether there's 99 lots on this site, 199. And so in order to keep that cost down as best as possible and keep that affordability level, then moving it in that direction was the objective. This is a unique area. This area has been in its vacated state since the beginning of time, with a brief period of golf course back in the 1910s and 1920. Unlike Cleveland Heights, that was built about the same time and acquired by the city by tax deed, this golf course folded for many years, and you saw the history of its lack of use for all this time. It's a great opportunity to make a major investment in this community. Affordable housing, attainable housing, workforce housing, whatever acronym you want to use to describe it, still that is that objective. I do think it would improve the project if we did put the 50-foot lots along that east boundary, more in liking with the lots that are already there, but leave the ratio at that 35-65.
If I can also comment, I was just looking. Over in the grasslands area, you have 3 communities within that grasslands area, and there are a majority of the lots are barely over 40 feet wide at the front footage. And that's some of the highest priced real estate in the city.
The steering wheel is in the hands of the elected officials and the staff to guide this crisis that we're facing now nationwide about affordable workforce housing. And there's not a lot of discretion, but one of the items of discretion that you have is to work with those that are trying to find a link to affordable housing. And this is certainly a move in that direction.
I have a question. The 50-foot lots that you have added, are those all along the retention and in the where that activity area is in the middle of that, like that triangle?
Yes, ma'am.
And then to clarify your comment about possibly making the east boundary 50-foot lots to line up with the existing neighborhood, that is not shown, but you'd be willing to do that in addition to the 50-foot lots along the retention?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
My question is, we're talking about affordable housing. What exactly is your price point that they would be sold at?
That changes every day, but it's going to start probably in the 190s to 235. It's a crying shame to say that $225,000 house is now defined as affordable. But the only thing that makes it affordable in these times today is very favorable interest rates. And when it takes the two household income, cop and a teacher or whatever it might be, in order to meet those requirements and qualify for those rates.
Any other questions from the board?
And this is a public hearing, so you may want to ask for any comment from the public, if anyone's here.
Chuck, did you have something to say?
Yes.
If we could have the public comment, if there's anyone else, and then have Matt go back into the presentation.
Anybody from the public that would like to speak, please come up and state your name and address for the record.
How you doing, board members? I'm from 742 Fairway Avenue, property owner, veteran. I just want to know more about is this actually affordable housing?
Sir, can you please state your name and your address?
742 Fairway Avenue.
Your name, sir?
Carlos Gonzalez, property owner, veteran. I just want to know, so this is affordable housing for, get more clarification as an owner. Like, is this for affordable housing? Because I know the housing crisis is in trouble. I was barely lucky enough to get approved. I had to go through a VA loan and everything just to get approved a house. So if this is, in a way, helps people like me, low-income earners, veterans who want a house, why not approve the 199 single family? But I would like more information and transparency also from the developers for homeowners like me. And that's all I have to say. Thank you, board members.
Thank you for your comments. Anybody else from the audience that would like to speak on this, please come up. And also a reminder to state your name and address, please.
Nancy Kearns, and I have the property at 702 Fairway Avenue. We've looked at that pasture back there for 65 years plus, and we enjoyed it, and the cows and all of that. But I would much rather see smaller, houses, individual houses, than 2 or 3 story apartment buildings. Then you're stacked up on top of each other. The difference between 40 or 50, I don't think is going to make that much difference. The people that are going to be buying these houses, they're going to be 2 income, they're going to be working, and they don't want a lot of yard to take care of. I've got renters, they don't want to take care of anything either. So my only concern was, to begin with, was the barrier that they're going to put between my property on Fairway and the development. I have a 2-story apartment building behind mine, and there probably is only 10 feet or so between the building and the fence. Now, there's going to be a backyard and everything, but when it rains a lot, that can get really wet. And so I want whatever kind of barrier is put up for the water or for the petition, I don't want it to go straight to the ground. I want mine to be able to flow a little bit, So I am concerned about that, and they've said that that would be okay. I mean, they would take care of that. Hopefully that will be true. But I don't have a problem with individual houses. I have a problem with 3-story apartment buildings stacked on top of each other. Then you're talking a lot of people. The other thing is, to have an entrance on Fairway, I don't think is a real good idea, but that's up to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments? Would the applicant like to speak and address those, please?
Yes, ma'am. To the answer to the gentleman's question about what is affordable housing, that definition has been bandied about quite a bit. In the literature, it's defined as those people who qualify for 110% of the median income of Polk County. So the median income in Polk County is about $44,000. So the household that has 110% of that combined income would qualify for affordable housing, provided that they can afford 30% of their revenue, of their income, is dedicated to housing expenses, including the cost of ownership, the mortgage, the principal and the interest, the taxes and the insurance it takes to support that. So that's pretty low bar. Regarding the comment regarding multifamily, there is today approved 120 homes on the north 10 acres of this property only, already today, 120 homes. What we're proposing to do is take those 12 buildings of 10 houses each, separating them. Typically in the townhouse community, the units are 20 feet wide, apartments or townhouses. Separate those units, take that 20-foot unit, make it 10 feet wider, give it its own yard with 5 feet on either side. That's the motivation. Provide freestanding homes instead of collectively sharing walls and sharing no garage, no covered parking. We think this is a better use. We think this is a more pleasing use, responds to the market better. With a very strong HOA, we take pride in our HOAs that run these communities. Make sure that facilities are maintained. You'll also notice, you heard last time, we see in these areas the need for off-street parking. We provided for off-street parking scattered throughout the community. That's an added feature that's not required, but it's one that makes it more livable and certainly makes it more attractive. So we think we have touched all the bases to satisfying an attainable, affordable, workforce, whatever adjective you want to use, housing that those people can get in to their first home, build the equity, and move on with their life. It also provides the opportunity for those who are moving down that don't want the bigger home, seniors or others, individuals, single professionals that prefer not to live in an attached apartment townhouse community and provide a yard, freestanding space. That's what we think is preferred, as opposed to the 120 units that could go there today, attached, 20 feet wide, and no setbacks. Thank you.
Any questions from the board? If the city would like to come back up.
Go first. Good morning again, Matthew Lyons, Community Economic Development. Just to summarize the changes between the previous application, the number of units has been reduced from 209 to 199. Approximately 25% of the lots are 50 feet or wider. We would define these as lots that could accommodate a 40-foot wide house plan. However, as you heard from the applicant, their intent is to uniformly build 30-foot wide houses. So we were hoping to have a little more diversity of housing types within the PUD, just to create more stability there. And I'll go into that a little bit as to why we have concerns about the 40-foot lot product. And those are primarily concentrated around the active recreation space in the center of the site. That's tract G. And the remaining lots are all 40 feet in width, would only accommodate a maximum house width of 30 feet. The applicant did agree to increase the minimum rear yard setback from 10 to 15 feet to provide a little more outdoor space for the residents there. And as you heard, they eliminated the cul-de-sac in the northeast corner of the site by moving the driveway connection further north there on East Lick River Drive. Okay, so basically the staff's recommendation, the two commercial nodes, which are going to be left up for the market to develop, probably will be sold off in tracks A and B. Those will be for limited C2 commercial uses. We have a full listing of uses that would be prohibited in the recommendation there. And we are recommending that minimum of 50% of the lots be 50 feet in width or larger. We did agree to increase the maximum garage projection to 16 feet. That was to accommodate one of the plans they'd shown in their previous application. And on the 40-foot lots, increase the maximum garage width as a percentage of the house plan to 71% from 60%, which is typically the maximum there. And again, that's generally intended for a 50-foot lot or larger, so a 40-foot wide plan. So part of this may be we're not used to accommodating the smaller 40-foot product here. Lastly, we are recommending buffering conditions. The lots that abut the retention area on Lake Parker Drive, we are recommending the applicant construct a 6-foot-high fence or wall of uniform design and materials that would be maintained by the HOA. That's to ensure you don't have individual homeowners putting up their own fences and have a hodgepodge of different styles of fences there visible from the lake. And along 982 East Memorial Boulevard, we are recommending a buffer, an 8-foot-high wall, I believe a precast concrete wall, with a 12-foot wide landscape buffer. The actual trees and plantings are specified in the conditions there. Back to the 40-foot lot discussion there. Historically, those are uncommon within the city, and as indicated, they've been limited to large master plan communities like the villages of Bridgewater or Hawthorne Mill, in which they comprise no more than 30% of the total number of units. So the threshold here, we understand the need for affordable housing, but we're concerned about the long-term performance, the stability of the neighborhood, and we would prefer to have a more of a mix of different size housing within the development there. And I'll let Chuck Barney speak about the transportation portion.
Real quick, Matt, I got a question on the buffer that's required along the rear lots abutting Lake Parker in the retention area. So those houses that have the opportunity to have a view of the lake and have a view of that retention area, would that buffer have to be opaque, or could it be like an aluminum fence that is like has the pickets on it where you can see? Because I see that as being an attribute to those lots, being able to have that view.
We had some discussion internally about that. I mean, it will be their private backyard space, and if these are intended as starter homes for families, you're likely to have a lot of the accoutrements there, you know, their little playground, outdoor patio furniture, other things, and we thought, you know, buffering it, screening it would probably be the better direction to go. I mean, certainly the developer wants to pay for an upgraded material to create that, but these houses, I mean, what they're being priced for at the level, I mean, they're not going to be that sort of tier that would really be marketed towards buyers who want the views there.
You could achieve some of that with the city's code for the requirements of planting 25% of the retention area, and kind of focus some trees and shrubs along that and create more of a soft buffer instead of just a vinyl fence that's back there. And it's far enough off the road that I don't know that you would be able to. And what's the speed limit on Lake Parker? Is it what, like 35, 40?
45.
You're not going to see driving going that fast, you know, the minute details of the backyards. It's just something to consider.
Did I hear you correctly when you said people in that price range didn't necessarily want to have that kind of view? Is that what I heard?
Well, I think it's not going to be the focus of the development. I mean, the homes are not oriented towards the lake. The backyard area there, it's commonly the private side where you have more of expectation of privacy than you do more of a public visibility type.
So the staff concern with the condition dealing with the fencing was to discourage a variety of fencing types along the street frontage that would be visible. Certainly, if the applicant in this instance wants to propose some enhanced landscaping around the retention pond, we don't disagree that that is a better alternative. But in the absence of having anything presented to us, we propose this condition to again address the concern about having a variety of fence materials along the backyards.
Well, they can certainly dictate that people, the residents who purchase in that subdivision, can choose this particular type of fence.
That's done
Correct.
through their deed restrictions, through their.
Yeah, exactly.
That's done all the time.
What was the purpose of the fence being on the backyard side versus the front side of the retention pond along the trail?
The purpose there was, I mean, you're going to have that expectation of privacy there already, and we want to have a uniform buffer there. The section adjacent to the retention pond, never mind the additional expense, but that's something typically you would not see out there.
And because I wasn't here again last month, my apologies, but why was the cul-de-sac taken out?
That was a requirement of the Land Development Code to minimize cul-de-sacs whenever possible to avoid creating more, internal connectivity issues. So that was a code issue that they responded to and corrected.
But the reason the cul-de-sac was there was, if you go back on the other plan, they were trying to preserve some trees that were up there.
Okay.
And I mean, either option works.
Okay. Oh, I thought they were changing from the cul-de-sac site plan to the one that's right there.
Yeah.
Yes.
I see.
Which I like this one better, given the density. It gives a few more access points instead of directing everybody out through 1 point or 2 points.
Well, it still had 2 points, and then they just added the fairway. What they, with eliminating the cul-de-sac is, I mean, my kids lived on a cul-de-sac neighborhood, so you ride your bikes, you're on a cul-de-sac. You feel a little safer.
Any other questions for Mr. Lyons?
What was the 50% recommendation? Was that based on previous use or just based on the conversations with the applicant?
Yes, I mean, again, this is something that the code does not allow what they're requesting. And we understand over time, costs are what are driving the smaller lot sizes. 15 years ago, every developer wanted 50-foot lots. Now 40s are the new 50s. The challenge with a 40-foot product is the streetscape, you get tighter driveways, closer together, more houses packed in, so you have a very different feel there. And if you go out to some of the 50-foot communities and then you drive to the 40-foot, they're a very different product. And so we don't know long-term how a development with this many 40-foot lots, how that's going to perform, how the property values are going to be stable, or is it going to be an owner-occupied community? We don't know. So we're trying to maintain some more of a balance with the intent of the current code, what it allows and what they're asking for. And the houses they are proposing, they're your standard, Central Florida suburban home product with a front-loaded garage. They're not really designed with any additional architectural features, elements that would maybe mitigate some of those concerns. So they're very much a typical suburban house, just on a smaller lot.
So Bridgewater has 40-foot lots, correct?
Yes, about 10% of Bridgewater, mostly the northwest area. The way back there, they have some there.
How are those performing?
I mean, they've about developed out there, but the overall community is stable and appreciating like that, so they're a minority of the product out there.
So do you have any indication that this neighborhood would not be stable?
We did receive several comments from adjacent property owners on the fairway about the influx and number of units. I do know in the county portion, They do have a large number of absentee landlords, rental properties, code enforcement issues, calls for service, that type of thing. So there is concern that, you know, possibly the neighborhood may be impacted if this development just not, you know, becomes stable.
Because I am familiar with that area because that was where my first apartment was. Those houses on Fairway are not necessarily huge either, so I don't think a small home dictates that it won't be kept up. That's just my opinion.
And the existing lots along Fairway, they're 50-foot lots, is that correct?
Yeah, and they have offered to change,
Along the,
to make since they have 25% now, changing those lots would increase that to 35%, is that correct? I think that's a good compromise.
Did you want to address
As I
something?
had said before, my concern was the 40-foot lots, and I really have changed my mind. I think that we probably should go along with this side of Fairway, making those lots compatible to what they back up to, and that would be an acceptable compromise for me.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, ma'am. Commissioner Knight, I think your instincts are right to holding different sides of town to different standards and expectations of home ownership. I propose a novel idea. Why don't we let the person who's making the mortgage payments decide what the front of their house should look like and how big the garage should be as a relationship to the size of their home? And allow that person who wants the 40-foot product on a 50-foot lot, allow that discretion. The way it's written now, someone, homeowner, an individual or buyer, prospective buyer, couldn't put any of the houses that we submitted to you earlier on any 50-foot lot. Now, we certainly, builders will make available the product to fit the lot, of course, but you have now reduced the discretion of that buyer. And when you are putting up thousands of dollars of down payment, again, affordability is the objective, and it's crazy to think that an affordable house is now well over $200,000. And between the mortgage payments and the cost of carry of $1,500, $1,800, $2,000 will be a very nice community with a strong HOA. The type of wall behind the lots that back up to the Lake Parker, we certainly have some discretion and understand Commissioner's comments. I share that concern, and I think given the discretion to us that we meet this standard, which we certainly will, enhanced landscaping can be a combination element in that regard.
I have one more question, and this might be for Chuck, but to access the dock, would there be one of those push-button flashing thingies to cross?
That's what staff has requested. And again, this is a county road right-of-way. They will dictate what goes in their right-of-way. If that's what they want, and that's what they require, then absolutely that's what we'll do. But to presuppose that's what they want is overstepping, I think, as we've said with these other DOT requirements. We'll do whatever we can't do less than DOT or the county requires on any of these access points. So let's defer to whatever their standards are. And if in the hypothetical that you require this, and the county says, we're not going to let you put that in our right of way. Do you think we're going to take maintenance of it in perpetuity? No way. Or in the alternative, they say, yes, that's a good idea, and we want to have it. Whatever that jurisdiction requires is what we'll do.
And that makes sense, but, you know, in good faith, you have children that are going to be moving in there, and a dock is an attractive.
And it very well may be a standard that we have to meet. But
Board members, I think it would be helpful to allow Chuck to go through the transportation conditions and explain the basis for those.
Well, good morning, everybody. For the record again, Chuck Barmby, Community and Economic Development Department. And we sure appreciate the opportunity to explain staff's logic in terms of coming up with the conditions that are included in the draft PUD ordinance that's in front of you today. When we look at trip generation, what we're looking at is not only just the 199 single-family dwelling units, we're also looking at the commercial that would be planned at the Eastlake Parker Drive and the Fairway Avenue intersections. So in a PUD, a planned unit development, it all has to work together. It's all got to work together as a package, and it's got to all work together as a unified development. So in terms of staff's calculations of what the trip generation could be for something of this nature, you're looking at just under 1,900 daily trips for a residential, for the residential component, and just over 1,600 for commercial. Now, based on acreages for those commercial nodes in tracts A and B, we came up with a general square footage of about 43,000 square feet of commercial. In using the kind of the industry standard, the Institute of Transportation Engineers trip generation manual, that's where we got these individual rates for a shopping center, which is a very kind of basic generic use within that retail commercial category, and a single family home, which is very standard. The total trip generation that's expected on a daily basis is just under 3,500 daily trips. So it is a sizable development when you look at it in its entirety through the build out of the project. You'd be looking at about 187 AM peak hour trips and about 360 PM peak hour trips. For the residential component, AM peak traffic tends to be just as important as PM peak traffic for operational purposes. For commercial, it tends to be PM peak. And when we start thinking down the road a little bit towards concurrency, or when we are finally giving a final development approval to the individual components of the project, PM peak hour is what we use for traffic concurrency. Major traffic study is required in the comprehensive plan if a development generates more than 750 daily trips. So this overall development program and build out would generate more than 4.5 times that threshold. So traffic is certainly an important consideration for the overall project moving forward. Now, there are variables over time that would affect the overall trip generation as you start getting more towards site, particularly towards site plan approval for the individual commercial components. You've got internal capture. What's the interaction between the residential and the commercial components? And that tends to lower the external traffic demand impacting Eastlake Parker Drive, 92, and Fairway Avenue. You also have pass-by capture, which is attracted in from the commercial uses from the surrounding road system. So as we get further down the road at concurrency, then we start looking at the interactions between the individual land uses and would come up with specific traffic concurrency conditions at the time of final development approval. But where it's important here, particularly as the city, as it's considering the approval of this development plan for this site, our city's concurrency management ordinance requires that we, at the time of zoning action, provide a non-binding concurrency determination for the development program. So when we're listing out those development conditions and the transportation conditions that are in the draft PUD ordinance, that's is really where it comes from. The city's concurrency management ordinance, as adopted by the City Commission, requires us to look at that level of detail. And to date, while we haven't received a concurrency analysis for the overall development, our biggest concern is frankly the operations of the surrounding intersections, particularly US 92 Eastlake Parker Drive and US 92 Fairway Avenue. Those are the two signalized intersections at the corners of the development site. And so what we've received to date from the applicant is a traffic distribution of how the traffic would interact and utilize the city's, the state's, and the county's transportation network. So as you can see here, about 60% of the project traffic would be coming into and out of the city of Lakeland. And so while we certainly understand the applicant's points about the maintenance jurisdiction and the ownership of the individual roads around the project, we can't get around the fact that the city is approving a development plan for this site within the city of Lakeland, and with that comes obligations that we have to take into consideration to establish minimum conditions that then get carried forward with those specific designs being permitted by those individual agencies, either DOT or the county. so in terms of the land development code, just providing some supporting language on again, the basis of our transportation conditions. It's pretty clear that a controlling entity is key to a planned unit development. And with that comes other conditions in terms of how we look at things in the totality, how things are coordinated, how things are really integrated together in a common overall development program, which is, again, the reason for a planned unit development. The comprehensive plan also is very clear in terms of what is expected of the city, what is required of the city in mitigating project development impacts. And so it's not just concurrency, it's also the operations surrounding development sites. And these are things that we have done throughout the city over my time here. Riverstone, Hawthorne Mill, this proposed development and others throughout the city, we have a list of conditions that make sure that the motoring public and the taxpayer and the future residents are protected going forward through the life of the project. And again, just more getting into particularly transit details of that, we have the ability to require transit mitigation through our multimodal level of service standards in the comprehensive plan, but ultimately the location and the configuration of those sites have to be reviewed and improved as well by the Lakeland Area Mass Transit District. So the implications of, again, in terms of zoning approvals is that our concurrency management ordinance dictates that we make these non-binding concurrency determinations at this stage of the development review process. We have to have a controlling entity that is involved and manages the overall project through build-out, not just the residential, but also the residential and the commercial components. We are the jurisdiction that's approving the development program. The mitigation requirements then get permitted through the permitting agencies, and that's where we get into specific design details that are important. And essentially what we want to also ensure of is that the development conditions make sense across the totality of the project, and we're not left with a situation where the residential moves forward, the commercial applies for a permit and it gets denied, and their argument is well, I'm not causing all of this traffic. This was already here. And this is a common argument that we deal with when you start splitting out large developments into multiple pieces. Nobody wants to pick up the tab when the bill comes due. And so we're trying to lay out a logical, methodical program for this to be addressed on the front end. And ultimately, what we're trying to avoid is a la carte approvals that get away from the entire intent of the plan unit development process.
Isn't that kind of thing what the impact fees pay for?
The impact fees are a different issue. Impact fees are for capacity. What we're talking about through here are operational issues. And so we're not looking at, say, Cumbia in 92 or down, further west on 92. So impact fees are for to address concurrency and capacity, but they don't address operational issues. And so the conditions that we will get into include binding concurrency determination certainly at the time of final development approval, but access mitigation. What we're looking at are turn lanes at 92 and East Lake Parker Drive. You can take a look at an aerial today, and those turn lanes that are out there are substandard given today's conditions. And typically, even before you start applying project traffic, you need about 185 feet of turn lane length.
Most of Highway 92, I got to tell you.
Yeah, to be fair, it's been that way for quite a while.
Exactly. And so what we want to ensure of is that as we add 3,500 daily trips, 360 PM peak hour trips, that we don't make the situation worse. So that's why these conditions here just address operational. We're not even talking concurrency at this point. We've got requirements for a frontage pathway along East Lake Parker Drive. Getting into the issue of the crosswalk across East Lake Parker Drive. Because the dock and that public facility is on the lake side of the street, staff has significant concerns about putting a crosswalk in on a 45-mile-an-hour collector roadway. And so the rapid flashing beacons that are included in that condition is a common way, it's something that certainly is used throughout the city, to be able to increase driver or motorist adherence to the requirements that they stop for pedestrians in the crosswalk. So, our typical mid-block crossings are on roadways with 30, 35 mile-an-hour speeds. With this being 45, we wanted to make sure that we as a city at least stated on the record and stated in the condition that this is our expectation in terms of managing that crosswalk.
Can I just ask a quick question? What is the speed limit on that part of Pipkin Road where Riverstone is being built?
The speed limit right now on West Pipkin at Medulla is 55. As you get to move towards County Line Road, I believe it's either 45 or 50 as you start moving further back to the east. And then we also have requirements for transit shelter and internal connectivity, again, consistent with the city's multimodal level of service standards. And so that's all I have in terms of the transportation.
Chuck,
Go
go
ahead, no, go ahead.
Go.
Nope. I insist.
Somebody go.
So, just so I understand, it sounds like the city's making these requests for conditions as a full package to avoid the part and parcel approach when it does go to DOT, and perhaps just the one commercial site might not generate the effective need for turn lane improvements or whatever it might be. I guess my question is if some of these conditions are not warranted based on DOT or county, whomever it might be, what's the process to address that? Or are these conditions then binding and they have to do it regardless, or they have to come back here? How does that work?
If we receive a traffic study that shows that the turn lanes are not required, say in any particular direction, say at Fairway and 92, then that's something that we will absolutely consider as part of our permitting process, either at the time of site plan approval or at plat approval. Our biggest concern is we haven't received the operational analyses for those two intersections to be able to make a more refined call. That's our biggest issue. With the traffic study, we would be able to, I think, pare down potentially maybe one or two of these conditions.
I have a question for you. They reduced the amount of commercial. If they had not done that and they kept the commercial there, would they have to do these traffic studies?
In terms of entitlements, as it exists today, the commercial that's out there is just at land use. There's no zoning tied to that, tied to the MCC along US 92. So when we start locking in at zoning is when you start to establish entitlements that then kind of set the baseline for concurrency determinations. And so with this being a zoning action, you're actually ratcheting it up from beyond just land use, which is what's out there today. So that's why we wanted to at least start to establish that baseline for the operational requirements, is because we're at zoning, not at just land use.
If they developed what they wanted to develop by right, which is all that commercial along the front, the multifamily, the townhomes, that's way exceeds the traffic and than what they're coming for now.
Yeah,
I think what Chuck is saying is they don't have commercial by right today, so there's no zoning on that portion of the property.
But they do have the townhome and the multifamily, correct?
They have the multifamily piece, correct.
Okay.
That's the only thing today that has zoning entitlements.
Okay.
And on that, a trip generation of 120 apartments is right around 600, 600 trips a day, not 3,500.
Madam Chair, Board, your observation is right. There's over 3,000 lineal feet of frontage there that has not zoning, but land use for non-residential uses. We're not proposing to go there, of course. We're certainly committed to a full-blown traffic study. And I don't disagree with anything Mr. Barmby said. If everything in that traffic study and everything that DOT and the county require, that's what we're going to do. We don't have the latitude to do any less. But my point is the point you raised. He said, well, if you make it a requirement and then DOT comes up with something different, what do you do? Well, we will consider it. We'll consider it, still leaves some discretion as to what, we'd come back here for another variance or to be relieved of that. I'm making the commitment today, which is obviously the law, it's not anything that we shouldn't do, is that we were required to do a full-blown traffic study. And whatever that study says, that's what we'll do, and certainly we'll share the information with them. And if they have some comments or suggestions or they want to have a conversation with DOT or the county, certainly that's part of the process that we go through. I'm just uncertain that any of these mandates wind up being contradiction to what the agency having jurisdiction tells us to do. That's my concern. Same thing with the transit shelter. If Lakeland Area Mass Transit wants a shelter, we'll accommodate it. But let's not presuppose that's what they want. They might, they probably do, but I don't know that. He doesn't know that. And until they go through their analysis of where the buses go and where they stop and where the passengers are coming and going from, that will be their determination. So all I'm saying is we'll do the traffic study, we'll give it to all the agencies, the city and the county and DOT, and whatever their collaborative findings are, that's what we'll do. Simply don't put something in here that may wind up resulting in coming back here for some kind of variance or relief from something that wasn't necessary. So it just seemed like a simple.
Back to my point, when you approach DOT, likely you're only going to approach DOT for the commercial parcels, is that correct?
Sir?
You're only going to approach DOT for the commercial parcels?
All of it, residential and commercial.
All at the same time?
Yes, the whole project, yes. Now, again, the commercial side will have a caveat depending on what the final use is. If it's a paint store, it's going to be one thing. If it's a gas station, it'll be something else. If it's a real estate office, it'll be something else. But those kind of things will come in as part of the overall review. And more often than not, the worst case scenario is factored into that process so that the improvements accommodate the greater intensity. The residential will be fixed. Commercial, although important parts of it, will be lesser influence than the residential. But let's review it as a whole, take it through the review process, and whatever that traffic study says and whatever the collaboration of all the agencies involved come up with, just give us the latitude to do that and not impose something that we may not be required to do, or leave something out that we should do. If you leave something out that we should do, agencies are going to require us to do it anyway. It just seems the maximum flexibility to expedite the process.
Mr. Lindsay is correct in that there is a process and that a traffic study would more clearly validate the conditions that are being proposed. But I want to clearly state that the applicant had been requested, as all other applicants are at this scale of development, to provide that traffic analysis as part of this application, and that was not done. The second point I want to make is the deference that all of the different transportation authorities and entities give to Chuck Barmby and the City of Lakeland in developments and in identifying what the needs are to mitigate for impacts of those developments. So Chuck isn't presenting these conditions just for the sake of putting something on paper, but from experience of knowing how similar projects, again, at these intensities, impact operational influences on the roadway network. So if we want to have more specific conditions tailored to this development, that would have been made possible if we had received that traffic study. One other point I want to follow up on is the terminology of affordable housing, and this is for Mr. Gonzalez's benefit. These are clearly defined terms: attainable, affordable, and workforce. They're not adjectives, they are defined nouns, each of which has very specific income levels tied to them. So you heard Mr. Lindsay talk about not only the development cost of the product, but also wages and what someone earns. And those incomes define each of these. So at best, with the proposed sales price of these units, they would be considered perhaps workforce housing. They are not true affordable housing units. There are no income restrictions on these units. They will be market rate. And again, as Mr. Lindsay stated, there is no public subsidy of this development because there wasn't an incentive to be provided to make these affordable units. If that would have been the ask, I mean, the city would have been more than happy to enter into discussions about that if these were to be true affordable housing units. No doubt they're workforce and they're attainable, and that's a needed product type, but I just wanted to be clear that they're not affordable housing units.
So
Can
I just get clarification perhaps from you? If we establish a condition that a permitting agency might differ from, how do we address that?
Yeah, so whenever the board imposes a condition, it's going to be, it goes on to the city commission. The city commission will adopt an ordinance. Because this is a PUD, that makes it a site plan based zoning. So those conditions would be mandatory as part of the zoning. So if, for example, what we have in front of us here, we've got some turn lane improvements. If the board imposed those as conditions, they would be required to make those improvements. To the extent that another authority had a conflicting requirement, then there would be a need to modify the ordinance and the condition within. But that would be only if they conflicted. There's some different conversation happening here about whether they would require it at all, because obviously through this process you could establish a higher minimum standard through maybe the turn lane might not be required, but the board could require it through this process if the board found that that was a necessary condition to make this density and intensity compatible with the adjacent neighborhood as part of the zoning entitlements which are being established here. It would only be an issue if the other jurisdiction felt that improvement was incorrect or was in conflict with their requirement, whatever analysis that they perform to enforce their rules.
Commissioner Locke, if we could simply suggest all of these listed conditions be qualified as recommendations or draw attention to them in the study and be considered by the permitting agency, that would be fine. But to make them binding obligations that may or may not come to pass, council's just advised you we have to come back through this process. In the traffic study, if it's really difficult to go through a traffic study analysis and the expense and the time associated with that if you don't know that the project is going to materialize. We know we're going to have to do it sooner or later as we move forward as a requisite of the agencies, and we're fine to do that. But if somewhere along the way that we decided not to go forward, or you turned it down and the commission turned it down, then the time and expense in that process is wasted. So let's do these things in a critical path method that allows the same results on the tail end. I don't have an issue with any of these things if the agency requires it. But if they require, if this is something beyond the agency's requirement that is within their right-of-way and within their jurisdiction, and they say no, then we got to go through this whole process again. Just list these things as recommendations or ideas to be considered in the deliberation, but don't make them binding is simply my point. If DOT comes back and says you got to do every one of these things and more, then of course that's what we'll do. That's our point.
Is there a way to not do them as recommendations, but to make them conditions depending upon the other regulatory agencies?
Subject to the agency's review.
What we can do, and I think is something that maybe what you're thinking is, we say at this time, short of an analysis, these are the conditions. But if there is an analysis that's accepted by the county or DOT that comes up with another set of improvements, whatever they are, that we will accept those, as long as it's approved by those other agencies. To me, that gives me more comfort as part of the entity that's approving the development to say that we are accounting for the impacts to our infrastructure. Because that's my other concern is, we understand that certainly there's a large cost in developing a traffic study on the front end of any zoning action, but our concurrency ordinance is clear that we have to make a non-binding concurrency determination at this time, and that data is valuable. But I think that if we can say that these are the conditions, but they can be modified subject to an accepted analysis by DOT or by the county, professionally, I'm fine with that.
I'm okay with that too.
Subject to, I think Mr. Barmby's right, and we're not trying to get out of anything, subject to these agencies' review, and he's right. It is a non-binding concurrency at this level, and it becomes binding further down the road. And if that concurrency cannot be satisfied, then the project stops right there until the conditions that allow concurrency to go forward, then it would. So the non-binding qualifier certainly mitigates the concerns.
Okay, so where do we go?
Oh, no. I don't know.
We've heard a lot of conversation, so I think it may be appropriate to, at this point, close the hearing to additional comments from the staff and the applicant, and entertain a motion that can be the prompt for the board's discussion.
Okay.
Councilor, before you close, just a closing comment. As you develop your motion about the traffic issue and the 3555 issue, I would draw that to your attention also, may require separate motions or part of a broader motion.
Yes, and you have a plan that doesn't, this percentage of 40 versus 50 lots, I mean, you have a plan in front of you. So if the board is going to modify that percentage of condition, and it may be, there may be a need to direct the applicant to go ahead and update that plan as well. I could foresee some potential enforcement issues with city staff by having a plan that shows something, and then you've got an ordinance that says something else. That might be difficult once it comes time to apply the ordinance. So it may be worthwhile to direct the applicant to update the plan to reflect whatever it is, the percentage that the board ends up landing on.
Sometimes I think we just need cue cards, just.
Obviously, I can't make a motion for the board, but that, you have a staff recommendation with a set of conditions that's clearly laid out for you. So, typically a motion to approve per staff recommendation is a pretty standard course, and then the board obviously has complete full discretion to modify those conditions at the pleasure of the board. So, just a thought.
So we approve with the conditions, but then we make a note to modify those conditions?
No. Let me clarify. Because per Robert's rules, you need a motion on the floor to begin discussion about the motion. Typically, what a member of the board to initiate that discussion, will move to approve per the staff recommendation. And that way, the discussion on the floor in front of the board is the recommendation of the staff. Or you could alternatively, move to approve with the conditions as requested by the applicant. Then you have essentially the staff recommendations with the edits that they've provided, just as a prompt for discussion for the board.
That one.
Does that still not make sense?
That one, that's what.
Yeah, like you said it.
The bottom line
Essentially,
is
you need a motion on the floor to entertain
a motion,
discussion.
yeah.
Okay.
Make a motion to approve based on staff recommendations.
So now you'll entertain some questions.
Okay.
And simply because you make that motion or you second that motion, you're not obligated to vote that way. I mean, it's just a way to get discussion going about that motion and the ways that the board may want to amend or modify it.
I would like with that motion to change the conditions of the traffic to reflect the discussion with the other agencies involved in this project, but to keep them as conditions.
Subject to the recommendations imposed by the city, the county, the state.
In coordination between the three. Is that right?
I guess my question is, if they're different, who prevails? If the county and the state are different than what the city,
Well, it's going to be
We can
based on
provide
the
some
jurisdiction.
guidance on that language. I think what we could do is have the conditions say that if these conditions are in conflict with the permitting jurisdiction, the permitting agency having jurisdiction, then the city would defer to that permitting agency. And Chuck is shaking his head, so.
I see.
That
Okay, that, I just wanted clarification on whose traffic study prevails, basically.
And that's what, as far as these conditions would be the conditions as they stand today, subject to that future analysis. DOT and the county accept a traffic study that shows something different, then we will defer to their decision.
And then the issue of the lots.
If I could just, for one housekeeping, did Board Member Locke, did you second the motion? I don't think we had a second on the
We did
motion,
not.
so we do need a second on the motion. The motion is to approve per staff recommendation, and there needs to be a second.
I'll second.
Okay. Now, sorry.
Okay, now for the lot size, because that was the other major issue.
Can I make a motion that we approve with the caveat that 35% of the lots be 50 foot?
With an updated site plan to
Correct.
reflect that change.
Correct.
And just to clarify, because we do have a motion that we're debating, which is to approve per staff. So your motion would be to amend have the maker of the motion amend to include the 35%.
Like you said.
Okay.
Is there a second on that motion?
Second,
Well,
I don't know.
I'm trying to keep this as easy as we can, but so far we have two suggested amendments
Okay.
to the motion. The first being that the traffic-related conditions, to the extent they conflict with another authority with jurisdiction, the city would defer to that authority. That was from Board Member Lunds. That was her suggested amendment to your motion. The second suggested amendment we have is that the percentage of, I think, of the, let's see,
50s.
the 50-foot lots would be 35%. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Those are the two suggested amendments.
With an updated site plan for record.
Okay, and we have a third then, an updated site plan.
Counselor?
Would that need to be approved at this level?
It
Or
would
could that
just
be
need to
approved by staff?
Updated before it goes on to city commission for the ordinance.
Okay.
Was Commissioner Seitz' comment regarding the 50-foot lots on the east boundary,
I don't, yes. Yes.
that wasn't part of the motion?
Oh, okay, thank you.
So the 35% would include 50-foot lots along the east boundary to match the existing neighborhood.
Is there any further discussion from the board on this, the motion and the suggested amendments?
I'm good. Anyone else?
Okay, there's a few different ways to accomplish this. I mean, one could be if the maker of the motion accepts all the amendments, then you can say so, and then the person making the second can accept that, and then we can call that for vote. If you don't accept those amendments, then the chair can call that the original motion to a vote, and then someone else can make a new motion. But it's on the maker of the motion second if you would like to accept these amendments.
I don't want to add any more to this, but there was one other recommended change from the applicant in terms of the garage size percentage of the overall width. Considering we are amending staff recommendations, if we want to include that, we'd also have to amend.
We would, because again, the motion that was put forward just to prompt the
Right.
discussion was to the letter, the staff recommendation to the letter. So all the discussion we're having right now have been our suggestions, but they have not been formally made part of the board's motion yet.
So just my opinion on that, and perhaps just to clarify to others, it sounds like the recommendation is to not adjust that percentage just so that they can sort of replicate the same product regardless of the size of the lot. Am I understanding that correctly?
Well, I think on number 2, they crossed out the part that was addressing the 50-foot lots.
Correct.
And the beginning of 2 addresses 40-foot lots.
Right. But the motion we've got on the table is for the staff recommendation, which doesn't have that crossed out. So if we want to accept that.
Oh, I see.
Or it sounds like we're heading in the direction of all the recommended changes minus
Just with the added
the
traffic
added, we could
issues.
rescind the motion and
It
start
may-
here and
it may
add.
be easier just
Perhaps.
to accept what.
The garage width, like Mr. Lindsay said, you're tying the buyer's hands to certain plans just because he wants a 50-foot lot.
Right.
That's not,
Yeah. So we're going to leave that one
So
alone?
can we make a motion that we strike that portion for 50, that they have highlighted out? Can we just do it that way?
Sure.
Okay, then I make a motion and we strike the portion of D2 for 50-foot lots. Front-loaded garages shall be limited to no more than 60% of the overall width of the front elevation of each dwelling unit.
I second.
Just to clarify, the intent with the 50-foot lots was to incur a variety of different house plans. So if you strike that provision, you will most likely end up with a uniform 30-foot wide product throughout the whole development there.
It's an option, right?
That's not true.
You're creating a choice instead of one per the 40-foot and one for the 50-foot. It's perhaps a mixture of the two for the 50-foot lot.
Yeah, I mean, generally developers, they build to the lot there, they want to get the highest return.
Sure.
They
I understand.
like that.
But you're also limiting a person who wants a smaller home on a
Yeah.
larger lot.
And maybe a little more green space
Yeah.
on the sides or in the back.
I would say let the buyer
Yeah.
make that call.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, there's a lot of different ways we can get to the finish line here. There's been a lot of different discussion. Formally, just a point of procedure, we have one motion to approve per staff recommendation with a second, and then we've got so far 4 suggested edits to that. The suggested edits really fall very much in line with what the applicant has requested as modifications to the conditions, except that the traffic conditions would stay to the extent that they don't conflict with other agencies. So it would just be adding that additional language. How the board wants to, and I don't want to assume that anyone's going to vote a particular way for any one of those conditions, but there's essentially two ways to do this. You could either, the makers of the motion and the second can accept the amendments, and then we can vote for that. Or if the maker of the motion doesn't want to accept the amendments, then we can vote for the motion as it was originally made and see what happens. And then if it passes, then obviously that'll be what happens. But if it doesn't pass, then the floor will be open for another motion.
I accept the amendments as proposed.
I'll second those.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
Did we do that right?
And we are moving on to item 4.
And my thing is gone again.
Item 4, approval of a comprehensive sign plan for Bonnet Springs Park on property located north of George Jenkins Boulevard, south of West Memorial Boulevard, east of Lake Bonnet, and west of Kathleen Road. Owner, Roundhouse Holdings LLC, applicant, Creative Sign Designs. This is for consideration of final decision.
Okay, the request before you today, this is for a comprehensive sign plan. It's a provision in the sign code that allows for developments in excess of 50 acres, basically to request and receive approval for a custom sign package to allow a more sort of uniform, harmonious, sign identity proposal. And the property before you today, this is the site of the Bonnet Springs Park, currently under development. It's a private nature park here on the east side of Lake Bonnet. It's a former brownfield. It was a railroad yard, I believe, up to the 1980s there. And so it was purchased a few years ago by a private group to create this sort of private green open space. And they're well underway. If you've been by there lately, you've probably seen several buildings under construction. And the request before you today is they have a sign package in mind, primarily mixture of directional wayfinding and building signage for the various buildings they have. There are, I believe, 5 different buildings. We have a greenhouse, event center, nature center, cafe, and museum buildings here. And I'll let the applicant speak if they want to go through this in detail, but we have all this in your package if you want to ask any questions or comments about what they're proposing. But it's fairly straightforward.
Would the applicant like to come up? Please state your name and address for the record.
Addie Mentry with Creative Sign Designs, 12801 Commodity Place. So as Mr. Lyons said, this is a private green space, Bonnet Springs Park. We are proposing a comprehensive sign plan to not really advertise, but more direct traffic. So there's a lot of wayfinding signs, street signs. There are also signage around the site that identifies plants and waterways. It has mile markers, which aren't typically things that we put into our sign plans, but we wanted to make sure that you knew everything that was going into the park. It's a private green space, so they're not the signage isn't technically on public right-of-way. And like I said, it's mainly to direct the traffic and to identify the various buildings that are housed on the site. I am welcome to stand for comments.
Any questions from the board?
These are all primarily pedestrian guide signs rather than vehicular guide signs?
There's a mix of both. There are trails within and walkways that have the nature signage, and then there's also wayfinding for parking and the trails.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Since this is part of a public hearing, is there anyone from the audience that would like to speak on this item? I don't think there's anyone, so.
We did send out letters, received one phone call just asking about the application before, but no comments, so no concerns about the request.
And let the record show that I'm going to have to recuse myself due to an active contract on this project. Are there any motions?
I'll motion to approve.
Second it.
All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? The motion passes, and we are on to item 5.
Item 5, change in land use from residential medium to community activity center on approximately .86 acres and a change in zoning from low-impact office and single-family residential to planned urban development on approximately 1.7 acres to allow limited neighborhood center commercial and O1 uses on property located at 1723 South Road 98. This is for consideration of final decision.
Good morning again, members of the Planning and Zoning Board. Todd Vargo again with Community and Economic Development. This will look a little bit familiar to some of you because I think it came, a portion of this came before you, it was either January or February, I don't remember. I should have looked it up. But some of you, it will probably be a little new too. We're at 1723 South Road 98. This is the real estate offices that were just improved recently. This to the north is the McDonald's. This is the Garden Grove Shopping Center here. There's I think a Circle K and gas station here. This is the McDonald's, and this is the recently renovated office building. The request is to change this land use from RM, residential medium, to CAC, Community Activity Center, and then also to change the zoning for this property in front, which has the renovated office on it, and the portion behind it, this is all one property that is undeveloped, to PUD, or planned unit development. Here's the another better, closer look. Again, this is the Morton Gentry Funeral Home. Again, here's the office building that's recently been renovated, and then here's the McDonald's. And this, I think, is the CVS part of the Garden Grove Shopping Center over up here in the corner.
Grove Park.
Grove Park, sorry. So again, the part of the request is to change the zoning from O1 in the front and RA3 in the back to PUD, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Another portion of this is the land use change from RM to CAC. This is just for the front property, again, the property with the newly renovated office building. Here is the property to the rear, the undeveloped property, and then here's the new, again, renovated office building. So the CAC Community Activity Center generally contains a shopping center with a grocery store, drugstore, one or major retailers, and a mix of smaller retail and personal service uses. As proposed, the subject site is outlined in red towards the bottom of the slide. This proposed PUD zoning will allow, the proposed CAC and PUD zoning will allow for future redevelopment of the subject property for retail, commercial uses on the front and office uses on the back. This is a map of all the CAC in the area, and the CAC Community Activity Center is limited to a maximum of 60 acres in area. If approved, this section right here went to CAC. This whole section would be 32, so 32 acres. So it would be in concert with the comprehensive plan. Again, this is the Garden Grove Shopping Center. Grove Park, sorry, I don't know why. I have that on the brain for some reason. Grove Park Shopping Center. Here, you'll see the CAC was extended across Fredericksburg Avenue to include the gas station and the McDonald's. These properties were developed in the 1980s prior to the adoption of a citywide future land use map. They were given a residential medium future land use in 1991, and then their C4 zoning was adopted in 1994 to recognize those existing uses, but at the time, I guess staff didn't realize the issue is that C4 zoning was not allowed in the RM land use district. So we kind of created our own little issue there. And the CAC that you see here, the pink color, that land use was given back in 2016. It was applied to those two properties in order to make the zoning and the land use coincide with each other. So that's how the CAC jumped across Fredericksburg Avenue from the Grove Park Shopping Center. Talking about the PUD, we've separated the subject property into two sub-districts. The PUD in Subdistrict A will allow most C3 uses, with the exception of a few uses that have disproportionate impacts on the road network or are inappropriate given the context. The only two uses we're suggesting to prohibit are very high turnover, which is like quick service, fast food type restaurants with drive-through facilities, and convenience stores with major motor vehicle fuel sales, and that's in excess of 6 pumps. We are allowing, although we're not allowing, or we're suggesting that the very high turnover fast food type restaurant be prohibited, we would allow one high turnover or fast casual, something like Chipotle restaurant with a single drive-through lane on Subdistrict A. Subdistrict B will be limited to O1 office uses, and I have a few slides. So Subdistrict A, this is, again, and it's, I guess it's important to know with the, or important to mention with the recent renovation of this office building, we don't anticipate any C3 uses coming anytime soon. Sure, they've spent a lot of money redeveloping this office building, and this is for the far future when any C3 uses would come onto site. So some permitted uses on that property that fronts US 98 offices, which it is now, hotels, motels, minor motor vehicle fuel sales. Again, we don't want the major, that's more than 6 pumps. Minor is less than 6 pumps. Banks, credit unions, savings and loan associations, exercise, fitness and martial arts studios, laundry cleaning establishments, retail ones, music and dance studios, pet grooming and pet daycare, repair-oriented services, tattoo parlors and body art establishments, vet clinics and animal hospitals, antique shops and consignment boutiques, liquor stores, tobacco and vape shops, low turnover restaurants, high turnover restaurants, which again, those high turnovers are the fast casuals, like a Chipotle or, I'm completely blanking on the sandwich place.
Subway.
Not Subway.
Panera.
Panera, thank you. That's the one I was thinking of. Yeah. Churches, synagogues, and other houses of worship. Those are all uses that would be permitted on that Subdistrict A that fronts 98. Now, on the rear portion that is now undeveloped, that will have O1 uses, and those include multifamily, single-family attached, of course, offices, barbershops, hair salons, day spas, exercise, fitness, and martial arts studios, funeral homes and crematoriums, music and dance studios, veterinary clinics and animal hospitals, churches, synagogues, and other houses of worship. There's a few daycare centers. They could be allowed through a conditional use permit. Group homes could be allowed through a conditional use permit. Institutional residential could all be allowed through a conditional use permit, but nursing home is also a use allowed in the O1 district. And this final slide is showing the access configuration between both the subdistricts and the adjacent properties. And it's important to do this because of the PUD needs to be, we kind of talked about this in 2 cases before. The PUD needs some type of unified control. And so as part of that, there should be access between the 2 sub-districts. And I'll overlay this, the next slide overlays this with the aerial photo, and you'll see that we're not asking for anything that's not already there. There's the arrows, there's already this entrance to the Gentry Morrison Funeral Home off of Fredericksburg. There's already this, again, that entryway comes down here and crosses right here. The existing office building already has the driveway right here on 98, and pretty much the only one that doesn't exist right now, I think, is maybe this, but it might be there. It's been a while since I did a site visit. So with that, I think I'm about done with my slideshow. Yeah, because we're down the conditions. So I'm going to let the applicant come up and make his presentation. If you would, Sheldon.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Yes, ma'am, will do. Shelton Rice, I'm an attorney with the law firm of Peterson and Myers, address 225 East Lemon Street, Lakeland, Florida. Today I'm here on behalf of 1723 US Highway 98 South, LLC. I have with me in attendance Mr. Dean Saunders, a representative from 1723. Sorry, let me get this. Thank you. Okay, I appreciate the labels on this, make it a little easier. So this is a request that has come before you once before. It was in February, to Todd's point, as far as when we came before, and it actually included a larger space. Looking at the map, it included some of this as well, and ultimately we decided, based on conversations with staff, and ultimately this project, its merits, and what made more sense for the area, that we would limit the request to only this northwestern parcel. So that's why it only includes the buildings that Mr. Vargo has stated. So our total property is 1.7 acres, plus or minus. It's already bifurcated with different zoning designations. It has O1 zoning currently on the frontage. That's the commercial area, and we'll show some maps that show that a little more clearly. Land use today is residential medium on the entire site. Land use proposed, so one request, a small scale comp plan amendment, proposes to change the land use designation from residential medium on the frontage, the commercial area, from RM to Community Activity Center, or CAC. And that's consistent, as we'll show, with the boundary properties to the northwest. Our request as far as the zoning, as I mentioned, O1 on the frontage currently, RA3 on the rear portion. Our proposal is a PUD zoning, which allows, as Todd has mentioned, C3 type uses generally on the commercial area, so more intensive commercial along the frontage, and then office uses as you come farther away from Bartow Road and get closer to the residential uses west of the property. This is an older picture. As you can see, the building is right here. That's actually the old building. It's been completely redone at this point. That's on the commercial area. It's a beautiful glass exterior and exposure to US Highway 98. It's a beautifully redone building. There's also another additional office building that's connected in the rear that's used as the current housing, I believe, for the Central Florida Development Council. So there's a number of uses that are there today. The main point for this request is we want to bring the existing entitlements more in line with what we think is appropriate for the area, consistent with some of the surrounding development that has taken place over the years, and obviously the high intensity of use along US Highway 98. So you'll hear me talk throughout this presentation about the commercial area and the residential area. The commercial area is in light blue. As you can see, that's the frontage on US Highway 98, and then the office area is on the rear, and that's, as you can see, a little closer to adjacent residential development. So the small scale comp plan amendment, this request is on approximately 0.9 acres. That's to change the commercial area, the light blue area, to CAC, Community Activity Center, from residential medium. The balance of the property, approximately 0.8 acres, The orange area or the office area on the prior map would remain residential medium, which is consistent and will allow the O1 type uses that we're proposing in the PUD. The future land use of Community Activity Center is consistent and compatible with the surrounding uses. You can see that kind of northwest of CAC and the shopping center. I'm not going to try to repeat the name. I'm sure I'd make the same mistake Todd did. But this is the current future land use map. You can see the Community Activity Center north of the site. As you move along northeast, you have the McDonald's and a gas station immediately adjacent to the site. You have industrial across the street along the frontage of US Highway 98, some residential medium, and then farther north, additional portion of the Community Activity Center. And this is the proposed future land use map. You can see I did my best to color it in. This would be the change, and it would extend that Community Activity Center to this boundary right here. The rear of the portion would remain residential medium. This request is only on the commercial area. This is the current zoning map. So I-2 industrial uses across the street. I say street, highways may be more appropriate. C4 uses, zoning uses are allowed on this shopping center. And then you have some additional office zoning along the frontage of US Highway 98, and then RA3 and RA4 and multifamily as you go farther south along the residential area behind kind of the more intensive uses on the frontage of US Highway 98. Our proposal would change the zoning to a planned unit development, and ultimately we'll talk about those uses, but that's the C3 type uses, so less intensive than the C4, but more intensive generally than the O1 uses that are allowed today. And the O1 uses would be allowed on the rear portion of the property, which is a, as defined in your code, a low impact office type use. So the planned unit development is on the entire property. The small scale comp plan amendment was only on the frontage to change RM to CAC. This is covering the entire property, all 1.7 acres. It would allow the C3 type uses in the commercial area and the O1 uses on the rear portion of the area of the property or the office area. Once again, just the map to reorient you. C3 type uses in the commercial area, light blue, and the orange would be the office type uses, O1. So commercial use restrictions, examples of C3, I won't go through these as Todd has already done that for you. There are certain limitations that staff has recommended that we're agreeable to. One of those is the limitation on very high turnover restaurants, and that they be limited to single drive-through lanes, hours of operation. So those types of things in consideration of the residential neighbors that are, albeit not adjacent, but farther west of the property, kind of southwest. And then motor vehicle fuel sales are a major motor vehicle fuel sales, more than 6 pumps. We're not proposing that on this site, and we're agreeable to limiting that use on the frontage. PUD office uses, so this is for the office area to the rear of the property, adjacent to the residential. Some examples of that are office, limited personal service and convenience, funeral homes, some residential uses, as Mr. Vargo has mentioned. And then kind of as a bigger picture in both of these, both the commercial area and the office area, we're looking at, when you look at the permitted use table in the land development code, certain specific uses are allowed as a permitted use in a zoning category, and then some are allowed as a conditional use. And you guys hear some conditional use applications. You've heard some today that come before you. We're proposing, because it's not certain as to what will ultimately be developed out here, that those uses that are identified as conditional uses in the land development code for those zoning designations would similarly be treated as conditional uses, except for those few carve-outs that I mentioned in commercial that we agree with staff are not viable on the site and don't make sense at this time. So looking at the compatibility, the future land use map amendment from RM to CAC, residential medium, to community activity center on the commercial area is in compliance with the requirements and policies of the land development code and the comprehensive plan. The property is located within a transit-oriented corridor where higher intensity is encouraged, So this is in line with that policy. The tiered uses within the PUD, where we have the more intensive commercial type uses along the frontage of 98, with a step down in intensity to the office type uses, O1 uses towards the rear of the property, and then stepping down once again to the adjacent residential property, is an example of good planning practices. And so that's why this PUD, in our opinion, makes a lot of sense. In addition, a PUD outside of coming in for straight zoning, because this is somewhat similar to asking for a rezoning, in that we don't have a specific intended use that we're coming in with right now. We're limited to those zoning districts that we've talked about and the uses that we've identified. So it's not that we're asking for lots of different things. It's just very similar to that. But the advantage is that in a PUD, it allows staff to condition the project to require ingress, egress limitations, and to address some access concerns, and to do some of the other things that make more sense. So we've agreed to that. We've agreed to pursue this PUD, and we think that's appropriate for this property. Mr. Vargo is going to go through some of the conditions. I'll just point out a couple of them that I thought were pretty relevant to our project. And I'll back up just briefly. I know there's been a lot of talk about transportation. There's some specific regulations and agreements that Mr. Barmby has forgotten more about than I know, but that are agreements between DOT and the City of Lakeland. I believe the City of Bartow is also involved in a corridor access management plan. And they basically, the proposal is to try to limit the number of access points to improve traffic along US Highway 98. So as part of this project in the commercial area currently has 2 access points. But at the time of redevelopment or development of the vacant office area in the rear, one of those commercial accesses or driveways along the frontage of 98 will be closed. So the interconnectivity that's shown, as was shown between Subdistrict A and B and adjacent properties, those are all in line with the policies proposed in the CAMP, as it's called, agreement or policy of DOT in the City of Lakeland. So we think this is a good project. It allows some of those additional things that we'd like to be able to provide for the city, commitments that we can make, while also keeping things a little broader as far as the uses that may come in at the end of the day, because right now it's just a little uncertain as to what those ultimately will be. So in conclusion, 0.9 acres on the frontage, commercial area. We're changing the comp plan for that, the future land use map, from residential medium to community activity center. The rear portion of the property would retain its residential medium designation. And then our second request is for the planned unit development. That would allow those commercial uses on the frontage, the C3 type uses with the exclusions that we've mentioned, and O1 or office, low impact office type uses on the rear portion of the property. So having said that, I'll be glad to stand for any questions that you may have. Thank you for your time.
Any questions?
That's my only questions regarding access off of Fredericksburg. I know that it's in close proximity to the existing McDonald's exit. Should development happen on Subdistrict A 20 years in the future, whatever it might be, is there, I'm assuming improvements would need to be made to that access point at that time? Is that?
So to the extent that access to the property would need to be readdressed, that will be done so whenever we come in for site plan submittal. That's part of the conditions. I think Mr. Vargo may get into that a little bit, but that is part of the conditions, that those would be evaluated. Concurrency would be addressed. A lot of those transportation things that we talked about in item 3, those will come back around and really be evaluated at the time of site plan approval, just because it's pretty uncertain as to what the impact will be. But as far as throat length requirement and some of those other things, there's specific conditions that staff is proposing that we're agreeable to that address that specific connection. But there is a connection that exists there today.
Any other questions? I think we're good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions from the audience of anyone that would care to speak or comments? I don't see anybody. Have we received any emails or phone calls regarding this item?
No, not since it's been re-advertised. But back when it was, this property to the south and everything, I think we did get a email for someone along. along Richmond Road, who is concerned about, there's an access point right across from his house, but since this property is no longer part of the request, you know, I don't see where that's relevant. But, so I guess I'll go ahead and read in the conditions. A, permitted uses. Subdistrict A, those uses permitted by right in the C3 zoning district with the exception of the following. Motor vehicle fuel sales major, which again, that's more than 6 pumps. Restaurants, very high turnover, quick service. And those are, again, generally fast food. There's a notation there that except that no more than one fast casual type restaurant with one drive-through lane and service limited to the hours between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. shall be permitted. Any site plan submittal for such a use shall be accompanied with a queuing analysis provided for the specific restaurant brand. Subdistrict B, those uses permitted by right within the O1 zoning district. B, access and transportation, applicable to redevelopment of Subdistrict A and development in Subdistrict B. 1, binding concurrency determinations shall be made with each site plan submittal. 2, access to the PUD shall be limited to those areas as delineated on attachment C. To provide cross-access between the subject property and adjacent property to the south, future development shall be required to include a stub-out or driveway connection at the common boundary line, such as the one that already exists. Cross-access in favor of adjacent parcels shall be formalized through an easement agreement in a mutually agreeable form that is recorded by the Polk County Clerk of Courts. 3, access to future development activity on the subject property shall be subject to permitting by the Florida Department of Transportation and the City of Lakeland. 4, any proposed modifications to the Fredericksburg Avenue driveway shall be reviewed and approved by the City of Lakeland. 5, the driveway connections to US 98 and Fredericksburg Avenue shall comply with the throat length requirements contained in Article 4 of the Land Development Code. 6, an integrated network of Americans with Disabilities Act compliant pedestrian routes shall be constructed between each principal use, and these routes shall be connected to the US 98 and Fredericksburg Avenue frontages. 7, bicycle parking shall be provided in close proximity of each principal building entrance in compliance with Section 4.11.6 of the Land Development Code. Non-covered bicycle parking devices shall be designed and constructed in accordance with Index 900 of the City Engineering Standard Manual. 8, the access and transportation conditions contained herein will not be triggered until redevelopment of Subdistrict A or development of Subdistrict B. C, development standards. 1, Subdistrict A in accordance with the C3 Urban Corridor Subdistrict standards. 2, Subdistrict B in accordance with the O1/Urban Corridor Subdistrict standards. D, performance standards. 1, the use of outdoor public address systems and bell ringers shall be prohibited. Outdoor speakers may be used at drive-through facilities, but shall be oriented such that they direct sound away from the residential areas to the west. 2, there shall be no loading or unloading of trucks, trailers, or other vehicles between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. 3, prior to the commencement of any development in Subdistrict B, a uniform Type A buffer as specified in Figure 4.5-9 of the Land Development Code shall be constructed adjacent to any residential property boundaries. F, buffering and landscaping in accordance with Section 4.5 of the Land Development Code. G, signage in accordance with Section 4.9 of the Land Development Code. I think that's it. Yep.
Is there a motion on this item?
Make a motion that we accept with the provisions of the staff.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Item 5 passes.
Thank you.
And board members, I just want to take the opportunity to thank the applicant for their patience and their willingness to work with us through this process, because I know it's been back before you a few times. And I think in the end that we did reach something that's mutually acceptable to all involved. So thank you.
And that concludes the public hearing portion of this meeting, and we are moving on to the general meeting. And for item 6, review of, item 6. I'm doing your job for you.
That's okay. Anytime. Review minutes of the April meeting. Everyone had a chance to review those. Motion to accept.
I make a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
That motion passes. Item 7.
Item 7, change in zoning from low-impact office to pedestrian commercial. To recognize existing commercial uses on property located at 3252 Kathleen Road. Owner applicant Jeffrey Peterson.
Good morning, or good afternoon. I don't know what time it is right now, but as you may recall, I'm Philip Scaris with Community Economic Development. As you may recall, last month, this came before you for a public hearing, and I'll just briefly go through the slides from last month, just to give you a refresher on where this is located. So it's 3252 Kathleen Road, 1.13 acres. It has a future land use and business park. The current zoning is O1. The proposed zoning is C1. The intent of the C1 district to provide for office uses and limited range of retail uses primarily oriented towards the pedestrians. Permitted uses do not include some of those sales and service uses which have characteristics that make them more appropriate for intense areas. So there's the site here. This is located at the southwest corner of Kathleen Road and Prine Road. Prine Road being in the county. You see this red line here. This is the extent of the city limit line. The subject property was annexed by the city in 2007 and was assigned a future land use designation of business park. As the applicant stated last month, that existing pawn shop has been there since the 70s. So the O1 zoning will recognize the pawn shop, but it will also make it more marketable as he moves forward with his future plans. It'll make the site marketable for some low-intensity commercial and personal service uses. Here's a location of the site. Again, here at Prine Road and Kathleen Road, you have Griffin Elementary School here in Skyview, residential community across Kathleen. The existing O1 zoning was applied in 2009 and limits the future development and utilization of the property to offices and limited personal service uses. The market demand for such uses in this portion of the city is minimal and severely constrains the ability for the owner to lease space and tenants. The change in the zoning from O1 to C1, if approval, allow for utilization of both office and limited commercial uses moving forward. And it's very important to say that no new development is proposed at this time. So it's the existing, as I mentioned before last month, the existing non-conforming structure will remain. There's no development proposals at this time, but it does affect the marketability of the property to move forward and maybe get some commercial uses there in the future. This does come before you with a recommendation of approval. We all lucked out as there are no conditions to read. So what we'll do is as far as transportation and concurrency goes, we will evaluate that at the time of site plan approval. So when this, if a new use comes in, they'll have to go through the concurrency and transportation process, and we'll review that internally as staff. And with the county, Kathleen Road County will have to, determine those transportation improvements at that time. And it is consistent, the O1 zoning, or excuse me, the C1 zoning is consistent with the underlying business park category, which allows for limited retail and personal service uses in support of the business park uses. There are some industrial and light industrial uses just to the west. So this could be, service, as a supporting use for those businesses. So with that, I will just note that we did send property owners to to send mail notices, to 40 property owners within 500 feet, and we did receive no objections, so there were not any objections to this rezoning at all. It is consistent with the comprehensive plan, and staff recommends approval. And stand for any questions you may have.
Is the applicant here?
He is.
I just want to congratulate you for going through the process, because at the very first meeting that we were approving something different, you expressed some frustration with your property. So kudos to you for going through the process and then being here where you are now.
Thank you.
If you'd like to speak, you're more than welcome to. If not, we can.
He's done a great job.
I have to hand it to him for sitting through this whole meeting today.
Do we have a motion?
I move that we accept the zoning change.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. Congratulations.
No one. Congratulations. And I second Sylvana's comments.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Item 8.
Item 8, which is the report of City Commission action on your board recommendations. There were no land use items that were brought to the City Commission in the month of May. But the last action that they did take regarding something land use related was the ruling to uphold the decision that was made on the cell tower at 1800 Hardin Boulevard. And I don't know if we have anything new to tell the commission or the board members about the status of that case.
The only thing I can report is that like Teresa said, the commission affirmed the decision of the board to deny it, so it's been denied, but we have not been served with a lawsuit related to it yet. We were anticipating that, but it hasn't happened yet, so nothing to report there.
Still early in the day.
Yeah.
They have 30 days from the day that the decision was put into writing, which may have been a couple of days after the commission action. So I meant to put that date on my calendar, but I'm also trying to kind of forget about it for a little bit.
And then for new cases next month, there is a request for a multifamily development at 1205 Neville Avenue. And you will be seeing another comprehensive sign plan. And this one is for what is now known as the Hawthorne Ranch subdivision off Pipkin Road.
All right. And then I go to the audience for anything further, and there's nobody here. So with that, we will adjourn.
Yeah.